right. And so we're live, and I'm here with a newfound friend that I met, 7 minutes ago?
Just about.
And we were introduced through a mutual friend, and he has an interesting story and some cool things going on. And also with the kind of the direction that the podcast has gone the last couple of weeks, I think this fits in perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, go ahead, introduce yourself, and then we'll just have fun with it and take it from there.
Yeah, my name is Chris Pakney. I'm a 44-year-old man. I'm recently retired from a local police department here in the Valley. Actually, we were at a couple of calls together, call outs there at the port when came up for CDU for you guys.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we've crossed paths before, but haven't probably seen each other. Before I was in the police department. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps and the Air Force. I grew up in a military family that was super dysfunctional, like lots of divorces, lots of abandonment, very, very toxic people. Ended up in Huntington Beach, California for high school.
Okay.
And, there I fell in love with two things, surfing, and then my sophomore year, I invited a girl to Winter Formal, and next week will be our 23rd anniversary. So,
oh shit!
Yeah, so we've been
Congrats.
together. Yeah, since sophomore year of high school, we've been together. So that's kind of where my life kind of journey, the path that took me to here. And along the way, I definitely lost my way and found myself in a very dark spot. And trying to find some healing and growing through that, I went to the plant medicines. I tried all the traditional routes of therapy and everything, and then going to an ayahuasca ceremony. Recently, I realized the absolute power of that. And then in hearing some of your previous episodes talking about suicide awareness and the power of spirituality and all those things, it resonated with me. And I remember on one of your podcasts, you had said that if this helps one person, if this reaches one person and saves one person's life, it'll make it worthwhile.
100%, bro.
100%, right? And so I'm at this retreat in Costa Rica, going through this, and the guy who was facilitating that said, he has an incredible life story, lots of trauma, lots of pain, but he's overcome that. And he was giving us tools and working us through these things. And he said, if I can help one person, it makes it all worthwhile. And I remember what you said. I'm like, gosh. And then the healing and everything that was coming through, I'm like, how could I help other people? Like, hey, I know somebody who has an audience and people who are interested in this, who need this kind of healing. What if I can put together a retreat? What if I can facilitate something and put it out there for someone else to have? And that's what I'm here for. Is we've established a retreat date for veterans and first responders, kind of geared specifically towards them, that they can come and get exactly what you guys have been talking about the last couple of weeks, that healing and stuff to come through. Okay.
Do you have like absolute specifics on that at this point?
Yeah, it's going to be April 6th through the 14th is the veteran specific one that's been registered. And it's going to be at La Florestral, which is a retreat center in Costa Rica. And the facilitator is called We the Medicine. His name is David Price, and he runs a business called We the Medicine. And what he teaches are things like havening, tapping, mindfulness, breath work, different meditation modalities and everything. So it's a workshop. So you're learning practical tools that you can take with you all the time.
Okay.
And then on top of those, you also have the medicine ceremony. So you have ayahuasca, and also the last ceremony is the traditional sweat lodge with peyote, which is a very different ceremony from anything of ayahuasca. That was probably for me the more difficult of the experiences, but it really integrated everything that we'd gone through, and seeing the power of that firsthand, like, yeah, it's absolutely a life changer for a lot of people, and it has been for me, and it's really redirected my life, and I can see how that can affect others, especially guys like us who kind of have the same kind of heart and the same background. It really does get you out of your mind space and into your heart, and that's the hardest journey to make, is that 12 inches between your thinking brain and your feeling heart, and letting that expand. And I think more than anything, what I had lost, especially through my police career, was my ability to feel and care anymore. I just felt like dead and angry and just constant in a cycle of negativity that was bothering me. So
that's one thing about the profession that, like, I mean, you hear it often inside of the profession, but I don't know if the public understands to what extent that is happening. Day in and day out, you are dealing with the bottom percent of society.
Yeah.
And not only the bottom percent, but also a lot of tragic events as well. Me being at the port, I didn't experience it to the extent of a normal patrol cop,
Yeah.
But it's like you're dealing with tragedy and you're dealing with criminals.
Yeah.
And when you surround yourself with that energy for 20 years, like, what do you think that's going to do to your heart or your well-being or your mental state? And it's not until, I think the wars played a big role in this too, because we got a front row seat to how difficult re-assimilating into a normal society after years and years of trauma has been for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, but law enforcement and first responders and stuff, it's not that far removed from that.
No.
In fact, it might be worse, because when you experience, at least for me, when I would deploy, the things you did and the things you saw, that was kind of my other life on the other side of the world.
Yeah. Compartmentalized.
Yeah.
It's not your here life, it's their life. Yeah.
And for cops here, this is their here life.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I lived in the same city that I worked in. So like I never got away from it. So the things that would bother me, some of those unresolved calls that, and there's no rhyme or reason like why one incident's going to bother you more than another. It's just something inside of you. Like this one bothers me. And I could drive around town through my neighborhood and be like, man, I went to a suicide here. I've been to a fatal collision here. Man, I had to knock on that door and tell, like, everywhere I go, like there's this constant, like, I won't say ghosts, but just reminders of those things that really sit with you, right? And if you don't have the proper tools to deal with those emotions as they come up, they accumulate. There's no place for them to go. And you start shoving them in that closet at the end of the hallway, and eventually you go to put something in there and it's all going to avalanche out. Right,
that's definitely a double-edged sword, because living inside of the community that you work in, on one hand, that kind of builds community policing. You know the neighborhoods, you know the people, you know the shop owners, all that stuff. But then the other side of that is you're out to dinner at Olive Garden with your family, and there's a dude you arrested at the table next to you, and then that kind of shit happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've been walking into Fred Meyer's with my kids, and there's a guy I arrested 2 days before standing out there, and they don't, a lot of times people don't recognize you when you're not in uniform.
Yeah.
They recognize the uniform. But I go 6'6", and I kind of I look a little unique. So
yeah, no. As soon as you walk through the door, I was like, "Oh, Chris is a giant motherfucker, man."
I stand out in the crowd, and going back, and that's one of the things that I learned during the my sweat lodge ceremony when I went through that. Was one of my big things that I've always dealt with was I was 6 feet tall, like I think in 7th grade, right? Like I've always been the biggest one around. I can't hide. Everyone always notices me. If I'm doing something wrong, I get noticed. Like when I was in boot camp, I got picked on, right? Because I was the biggest, gnarliest one there. So, and I internalized that a lot because I know people are looking at me. So you put those expectations on yourself that I need to be something that I'm not, right? To impress these other people or to be a guide or be these things. And you end up living your life for other people, and it's not a grounding place to be, right?
Yeah.
So, but that goes all the way back to, again, you lose your way of who you are when you deal with those negative energies all the time, and you don't have a good spiritual foundation, and maybe your body is breaking down and things. So, you got to work around those things.
Yeah. For me, and I mean, like you said, you feel like you already know me because you've listened to the podcast for a long time. I honestly don't feel like I necessarily lost my way. I feel like maybe I never knew it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I joined the military not because I was a patriot or because I loved my country. I joined the military, and I'm always very honest about that, because I was 18 years old and I was lost, and I didn't know what was next. Yeah. And that started me on this trajectory to where military, and then 9/11, and then tons of combat deployments, and then a lot of guys from the special operations community. The natural progression is right into the contracting world. And then what do a lot of us do is law enforcement. And then before I know it, it's like, I've been doing this thing, running around with guns and being part of violence for 20 years. Yeah. And it's like, and it was all on a whim,
For what? What was the purpose? Yeah. To what end?
And I look back on it now, and it's like, I will never say that I regret it, because it built me to who I am today. And I'm appreciative of that journey, the ups and the downs. But at the other side of the coin is, I don't think that that's really like who I ever was in my heart. Like,
yeah. I found myself kind of in that existential kind of crisis too. Like, what am I doing? Like, am I doing the right thing? And I felt lost like that too. So yeah, I absolutely feel that.
So let's go back and I'd love to hear about kind of your journey that brought you to here.
Yeah.
What year did you join the military?
I joined in 1996.
Okay.
So I joined the Marine Corps, and went into the infantry, wanted to do that because it sounded like cool, you know.
You saw Full Metal Jacket growing up?
Yeah, I saw two movies growing up as a kid that really influenced me. One was Top Gun, obviously, and the second one was Full Metal Jacket. My stepdad was a Air Force pilot.
Okay.
So growing up through that, like I always looked up to him and saw the flight suit, and that was the coolest thing ever. And then obviously Full Metal Jacket, for whatever reason, just appealed to my sixth sense as a kid. You know, like I want to do that.
I don't know what it is, but it's just something inherent inside of men that
young boys, just like you see those commercials. And I remember the first time I was out in the field and I was freezing cold, just soaking wet, tired. I hadn't eaten in like 3 or 4 days. And I remember the recruiting commercials, seeing that. I'm like, man, that looks so cool. and here I am out there doing it going, this sucks.
Yeah, it doesn't feel so cool now. Yeah, I remember like we did a training op, and this was down at Fort Lewis in the middle of the winter, and we're doing patrol base operations, and you would take turns with your ranger buddy who was on the ground, and then you would sleep directly on top of your ranger buddy, because you know how the ground just pulls the heat out of you. And I remember thinking the same thing. It's like, there's nothing badass about this. This just fucking sucks, dude.
I had a similar experience. I was stationed in Washington, D.C. at the Marine Barracks, and we were all infantry guys, so they would use us occasionally for infantry training. And we went out to Fort AP Hill for some special op guys, and they just wanted us to be op force. So they wanted us to move from position to position. And basically all they were doing was setting up ambushes or trying to report our position, trying to catch us and whatnot. And we'd been out there for 3 days just moving stupid position to position. And they're like, oh, hey, you got about 6 hours. Go ahead and dig in and create a position. So me and 4 other guys, we dig a hole with our E-tools. That's always a fun evolution. Yeah. And it's, I think it was like the middle of November, right around Thanksgiving. And this is what happened. We were supposed to have leave, and our block leave, my section, our block leave got canceled so we could go do this operation.
Lucky you guys.
Yeah. So we don't get to go home for Thanksgiving. And so we're out here in the field, and everybody's hating life, and we haven't slept, and it's starting to lightly snow, and we're in this hole in the ground, and the 3 of us are looking at each other and like, man, this sucks. And one guy's like, man, it can't get any worse. And right as he said that, the snow kind of stopped, and you heard rumbling in the distance, and then a lightning crash, and then the rain turned to freezing, or the snow turned to freezing rain.
Yeah.
And now we're in this hole, and all we could do is just laugh at each other. It's like, you had to say it, didn't you? It couldn't get worse. And yeah, here it is. It's worse. So it could always be worse.
That's funny, man. So then how long were you in the infantry for?
Actually, my actual time in the infantry is really short. So as I was graduating from the School of Infantry, they screened a couple of us out, and they brought us into the base auditorium, or the auditorium there at the infantry school. And they're like, hey, there's an opportunity for special assignment if any of you guys are interested. And it's going to take you out of MOS though. And so a couple of guys were like, no, man, I'm not interested. And they left. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, this is going to be some kind of high speed, low drag awesomeness, right? And it turns out it was for a presidential security detail. So the guys who go to the White House, Camp David, or White House Communications Agency. So they would send you off to security forces school. You go to Marine Barracks at 8th and I in DC. You'd wait for your top secret clearance to come through. And the majority of guys went to Camp David, but some guys went to the White House Communications. And then you wear a suit and tie. You travel around the world with the president. Like, it's a cool assignment. So I ended up at the barracks, and then I ended up going to the White House Communications Agency, and I spent the rest of my fleet tour at the barracks doing that, which is really cool duty because I got to see the world, wore a suit and a tie, traveled with the president, the vice president, secretary of state, went to a lot of cool places. So it wasn't the typical infantry experience.
Yeah.
Most guys got to fly in Air Force one time, there was some cool perks to that job for sure.
Well, and also it was peacetime.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's a huge difference because the 0311 experience from 96 to 2001 is vastly different.
Exactly. I had some friends that stayed in, and the entire MOS changed, from peacetime to wartime. It's like, now it's a cool thing to be in. And when you're in garrison and in the peacetime in the infantry, it's not a fun experience. So
yeah, area beautification, shining your boots.
Yeah.
I always say, like, when you're in peacetime, they put a lot more emphasis on the garrison operations, and that's just the military.
Yeah, there's nothing else to do.
And even when you're in Ranger Regiment, people think you're in you're in special operations. You know how many fucking days we're out there
picking rocks
and taking care of first sergeant's lawn, and it's like, I don't care what unit you're in. When you're a fucking private and it's peacetime, they got you doing busy work.
Absolutely. They're going to keep you gainfully employed one way or another.
Yeah, I remember even when I was down at Fort Benning during training evolutions, like Ranger School, Airborne School, whatever, even Ranger Indoc, if there's any block of time where it's like, hey, you graduated one course, but your next course doesn't start for 16 days or whatever,
yep.
dude, you're going to become a professional painter. Yep. Like there's a big building, School of a Soldier, I believe it's called. What is it? No, it's where we train foreign militaries.
School of Americas?
School of Americas down in Fort Benning.
Yeah.
And, me and a couple other RIP holdovers, Ranger Indoc holdovers, we painted that whole building. And it's like, it's always something. They're like the house in Vegas. They're going to win. Yeah, they're going to get it out of you. You know,
casual status that'll always kill you.
And so, is that kind of like the old guard or the honor guard, the stuff you were doing, or completely separate?
No, that's a separate thing. So there's the like the ceremonial marchers, like Silent Drill Platoon, and all those guys who are at the Marine Barracks at 8th and I. And they're all infantry guys too. So the entire Marine barracks there is an infantry battalion.
Okay.
They all come from the grunts. Most of the NCOs are fleet guys who've come there. So, because
I remember when I was in, like, they would screen the tall motherfuckers for that. So I was wondering if that was part of why they went to you.
Yeah. So when I first got to the barracks, the color guard there, I think you have to be like 6'4", 6'5" to be on the Marine Corps color guard. So they saw me walk in as a part of the guard detachment, and their NCOIC tried to snag me out, and I'm like, nah, man, like I want this presidential detail. It's going to be a lot cooler. So
yeah, so Mike Glover did that in the old guard.
Oh yeah,
and dude, he has like a lot of cool stories from that. And I used to think about that if I wanted to stay in. I mean, it's so different from a normal military experience, but that's why it would be kind of cool too, you know? And a good buddy of mine who was in Ranger Regiment with me, he had done that previously for the Navy before he switched branches of service to come to the regiment. He had tons of cool stories too. So
yeah, we had some fun. It was I won't say a difficult assignment, but you're a young kid, you're 18, 19 years old, you're away from home for the first time, you're learning how to be an adult, and you're in the infantry, you know, or at the White House, you know, like there's certain expectations on you not to be a moron. And it's hard. It's hard when you're a, 19-year-old Lance Corporal not to do stupid stuff. So they kept us on a really tight leash out there. So probably for our own good. Yeah,
no, for sure. And so you did that until the remainder of your enlistment?
Yeah. So as my enlistment was ending up, I wanted to stay in the Marines. I really enjoyed my time there. And I was like, I had been meritoriously promoted out of boot camp and then also out of the School of Infantry. So after 6 months in, I was already E3, and then I was promoted to corporal really early as well. So through all those things, like I was having a really, really good run of a career as far as my advancement goes and my responsibility, and I enjoyed it. And so I was like, if I'm going to do this, let me go to college, let me get a degree, and I'll go to OCS and be an officer and make a career out of this. And so I got off active duty and I joined a reserve battalion near my hometown in Huntington Beach. So it was our Arty battalion. And so I got retrained and cross-trained out in artillery, which was kind of cool. It's like being in the grunts, but you don't have to walk everywhere. So our artillery was nice.
That's right. Pendleton's a big artillery base, huh?
Yeah, it's the West Coast Marine base. So they have everything there. So you have all the artillery and the infantry. There's several battalions out there. So,
dude, I went to pre-scout sniper at Pendleton, which was, people think like pre-scout sniper is a bunch of cool, like shooting. No, it's all land nav. That's all it was. It's just, but the gnarliest land nav course I've ever been on.
Really, at Pendleton?
Yeah, dude, like the distances between points. And then in the Army, when you reach your point, it's usually on like a little metal post that's like 3 feet in the air and a little dog tag is like attached to it. Dude, out here in Pendleton, the points were a dog tag that was like driven into the ground with a stake.
You got to hunt for it.
You had to be on top of it to find it. But dude, while we were on that course, there was artillery landing that was so it felt danger close that I was like, with the guys paired up with, I was like, dude, checking the map, I was like, dude, I think we might have went outside of like,
do we wander into the wrong area?
Are we in the impact zone right now? And dude, the whole time it was like that. I was like, fuck, man.
Like if you haven't heard artillery going over your head before, when you can actually hear it zipping through. It's unnerving when it's passing right over you close. Yeah. So
then while you were a reservist, you went to college as well?
Yeah, so I was finishing up college, and we went out for a combined arms exercise out at 29 Palms. And we were out there and doing the thing, and about a week into it, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, just as the sun was starting to come up. I'm laying out there, and all of a sudden 2 F-18s come over our position. And I looked up, I'm like, fuck, man, I've always wanted to be a pilot. That looks so freaking cool. I'm like, I want to go be a pilot. And so I went and talked to the, after the CAX was over, I went and talked to the battalion commander, the battery commander. I'm like, hey, sir, like, do you know any connections or whatever? I want to go to OCS. I want to be an officer, and I want to fly jets in the Marine Corps. He's like, I know somebody. So he puts me in touch with an officer selection guy. And he's like, hey, man, your service record looks good and everything. You'd be competitive. However, your chances of flying fighters in the Marines are very, very, very small. You're going to likely fly helicopters. I mean, just way more assets that way. So I wanted to be a fighter pilot, again, because of Top Gun. And then ultimately because I wanted validation and approval from my dad because he was a pilot. You know, I didn't know that until many years later that was kind of the driving factor for me. I just thought it was something I wanted to do, and it was. So in talking to him, he was really honest with me. He's like, you're going to fly helicopters. And I'm like, ugh. So I talked to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I love the Marines. I want to fly jets. And he's like, well, the Air Force has a lot more jets and you have a lot more opportunity. And I'm like, I'm a Marine.
Yeah. I hate the other branches of service.
Yeah. It was like, it just felt like dirty, you know? So it was like, let me go in and talk. So I went into at Loyola Marymount University there in Southern California. There was a ROTC detachment for the Air Force, and I went in and I talked to the commander, and he was a colonel, former F-15 driver, super nice guy, and immediately had a good rapport with him. And he's like, "Yeah, come in and take the AFOQT and an aptitude test." So I took the AFOQT, I took the aptitude test. I scored really well on both. He's like, "Hey, man, we'll give you a full ride scholarship right now." And on top of that, we'll give you a guaranteed flight slot. He's like, you qualify. So I got my scholarship, and at the time they said, hey, we're going to put you in for an inter-service transfer to release you out of your reserve obligation from the Marine Corps into the Air Force ROTC, so you could get the scholarship money and everything, because you kind of have to do like a quasi-enlistment once you go into ROTC to get the money. But since I was already obligated to the Marines, I had to get that form filled. And as that was getting filled out, I think it was about 2 weeks before that whole process was officially done, 9/11 happened.
Oh, shit.
And so here I am, like, I'm a college kid now, and I'm attending these ROTC classes for like the last month or two. And now I'm...
And you're what, 22 or something?
Like 22, 23.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of the old man. A lot of these, it's weird feeling old when you're 22 or 23 in relation to kids who are 18, 19, 20. But I remember going to the colonel. I'm like, hey, sir, like, can we cancel this? Can I go back to my unit? Can I go back to the Marines? Like, he's like, Chris, this is going to be a really long war, and you'll have your opportunity. I was like, oh, Roger that, sir.
Man, he knew.
Yeah, he knew.
You know?
And he's like, and I remember him saying, he's like, this is a war against terrorism. And he's like, it's not going to end. Uh-huh. He's fairly prescient, you know, to know that was coming.
Yeah, right after 9/11, like, we were chomping at the bit to deploy. And I remember 3rd Ranger Battalion got to do the invasion. And you've probably heard it on the podcast before. My company was supposed to be part of the invasion, and we got pulled last minute. I mean, we were at an airfield in Amman, Jordan, ready to go. And I remember we were all thinking like, fuck, we missed it. We'll never get our chance. We thought it'd be another Desert Storm, like in and out, you know? Nope.
No, yeah, it ended up being a long war, but not for this guy. So, long story short was I got my flight slot and ended up going to NJEP, which is down at a Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, and it's a Euro-NATO joint jet pilot training. And all of the NATO countries send their tactical pilots to the U.S. to train. Okay. Because they have airspace and weather restrictions and everything, and it's expensive to operate pilot training, so NATO agreed. And usually when we fly tactically, anytime operationally, we're flying with coalition pilots anyway. So having us all trained together in the same place puts us all on the same page. So, and I think it's only like the top 5 or 6% of American pilot candidates get to go there because you get guaranteed a fighter aircraft. You don't have to compete with everybody else for heavies or whatnot. You go there, you're going to a fighter platform.
And you got that position I got based on like testing scores or?
Yeah. So when I went through, was it the field training there for the ROTC there, I was the honor grad from that. So I got Distinguished Graduate Award. I finished with a 3.98 GPA. So all the things that were in my power to control, my grades, my performance and everything, they were all maxed out. So
nice.
I continued kind of that path I had in the Marines of, meritorious promotions, always ahead of the zone, like always being on top of it. Everything was squared away that if I had physical control over it, I was going to max it out just to give myself the best advantage. Another example is that part of your selection for a pilot is how many flight hours you already have previously. And so I went out and I spent my own money. I got my private pilot's license and I maxed out the hours that would give me the maximum amount of points towards pilot selection.
Oh, nice.
So before I even touched an Air Force jet, I already had like 150 hours in civilian time. So like I was that far ahead. And I felt unstoppable, right? Like in my heart, like I knew that there's nothing that can stop me. And here I am, living my dream, right? Like flying these jets at NJEP and having a great time, right? Like, man, I'm going to go be a fighter pilot. And about halfway through training, I started having problems with my left ear specifically. And when I was a kid, I had a really bad string of ear infections to the point where they put a couple tubes in my ears 2 or 3 times. And when I was flying the smaller aircraft that didn't go up and down quite as fast, the pressure changes aren't fast. But when you're flying in like a T-37 or a T-38, the pressure changes are quick because you're changing altitudes very fast. Mm-hmm. And, you go to clear your ears, and I couldn't bilaterally clear my ears fast enough. So my left ear wouldn't clear at the same time on my right. So if you get one ear that clears and one that doesn't, it starts giving you vertigo.
Oh, okay.
And it starts giving you the really bad spins. And so I had a couple flights where it started to bother me, but I was able to get it cleared. And, there's a couple other flights where I had air sick issues. So twice I got air sick, and those count against you. You can't be getting sick while you're flying jets. And so I went a couple weeks and I felt fine. There's a few times I was like, I'm going to have to hold that one down, swallow it back, and I can make this, I can do this. And it felt really frustrating because it was a physiological thing that was happening to me.
Mental toughness isn't going to change anything.
It was completely outside of my control, right?
Yeah.
And I had worked so hard. This is my lifelong dream, to be a fighter pilot, right? To do this thing.
And you're there.
I'm there doing it. And I went flying. I had an aereo solo, and I took the jet out, and I'm flying in the area, doing my maneuvers and stuff. And I'm doing a clover leaf, and I had a little bit of a congestion, a little bit of a head cold. And the reason why was we had about a 2-week window where there's terrible weather, so nobody was flying. And when you're in pilot training, everything is driven by the syllabus, the timeline, right? It's 55 weeks start to finish, and you get it done, right? And so I had a couple of mechanical aborts for things that went wrong with the jet. Like within 4 flights, I had 3 times where I had to come back because something went wrong with the jet. So they started calling me Baja for broke another jet again. so that kind of stuck with me, man. Everything I touched just broke. And I went flying. Like I said, that I went on an area solo, and I had that problem with my ears when I was by myself in the jet. And it was so bad when my left ear cleared, it sounded like the ocean was in it, just like, and my right ear wasn't. And I'm by myself just spinning. Like I'm in the jet, and I feel like when you're super drunk and you're laying in your bed and the room is just doing that, but stone cold sober in a jet by myself at like 20,000 feet.
Yeah, that's fucked.
I thought I was going to have to eject, bro. I was like, what am I going to do here? So I had enough in me to like pull the jet up to the very top of the airspace to give me as much, that's low density altitude to try to get that ear to clear. And for about 3 or 4 minutes, I just put the jet over and just do a turn. So it would basically fly itself. It was trimmed out. I didn't have to touch anything. And I'm just working on this ear, and everything's going through my head. Like I'm going to throw up, which I did. And it's just spinning. I'm like, I can't even call for an emergency. I can barely get on the radio. I'm like, I'm going to have to eject. And finally, by the grace of God, that ear cleared. And it's like, I was able to get it there. I'm like, okay, I can see straight. I'm not spinning. I can land the jet. And I went and I landed the jet. And as I'm taxiing in, I'm like, do I say anything? And
so did they, based on like because you said you had to pull it to a higher altitude and do a certain maneuver, were they able to know there was anything wrong?
No, because you're assigned when you're on a mission out there. So in the training airspace, there's like blocks of airspace that you get assigned. So you have between this floor and this ceiling, between this radius and this distance, right? So so that's your space, and you can do whatever you want out there. So I'm by myself in the jet. There's no instructor, it's just me. And when I landed, I'm like, no one's going to know, right? If I don't say anything, no one knows, but I know. And I know I got sick, and I know I was unsafe, right? Like that was not a good look, right?
Yeah. At this point, it's also self-preservation, being honest about it.
Yeah. And And it was a hard thing to be honest about because I didn't want to be honest about that.
Of course not.
I can get over this. I can beat this. This isn't going to get the best of me. And I went in and I talked to the flight surgeon, and he looked and he's like, hey man, you got a perforation in your eardrum. He's like, yeah, it's really painful and I can't clear my ears. And he's like, yeah, how long have you had this? And so a little while went by, my ears started to feel a little bit better. They allowed me to go to the altitude chamber to try to see if I can get it. And I can't bilaterally clear those ears fast enough not to induce vertigo when the pressure changes are quick. Boom. DNF, you can't fly anymore. Lack of adaptability. Done.
Did they want to work with you at all based on, I mean, they put a substantial amount of money into you at that point.
Absolutely. So, the flight docs were really good. They really tried to help me. And they gave me the opportunity to see, hey, like once the eardrum healed, can you go to the altitude chamber? Is it going to be fixed now? And it wasn't. And by this point, like that flight, I don't want to say it spooked me, but it was like kind of a come to Jesus moment that if this happens to me by myself, or, God forbid, if I'm in a 2-seat jet and I got a guy in the back who's, relying on me or something, or I can't control the jet and it crashes into a house and kills people on the ground because
you didn't want to be honest.
Because I couldn't be honest. I couldn't live with myself. Right. And it's not that I was afraid to die, because this is okay. Like this can go.
I mean, you're flying fighter jets.
Yeah. So I'm not afraid of that. But I was afraid of the consequences that would happen if I wasn't honest. And I knew I couldn't, I can't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anyone amongst us who does. And to not be honest about that would be lying.
Yeah.
And so I had to be honest with myself. And that was such a hard pill to swallow. And honestly, man, that for 10 or 15 years after that, it was hard not to feel the disappointment from that.
For sure.
It really was. In retrospect, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, but I didn't realize it at the time.
I mean, I think about that too with I don't even know if you're familiar, but I have a flight school story as well. Yeah. Because when I left the Ranger Regiment, I went into the Army's flight program at Fort Rucker.
Really?
To fly. I was actually slotted to fly 47s. And, I went through the warrant officer course, became a warrant, and was literally like in my first months of flight school. I hadn't even been in the air yet, been in the simulator a couple times, and I was doing a CrossFit workout and I hemorrhaged my retina. And at the time I went partially blind in my left eye. And at the time I was like, am I having a fucking stroke? Like, it was scary. Like, I'm going blind in one of my eyes. And it was after I was doing wall push-ups. So I was in a handstand position. My feet were above my head, tons of pressure in your brain. Yep. And I went partially blind and I was like, oh fuck, I think I just had an aneurysm or a stroke. And so that's why I went to the hospital on base, because I was like, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have said a fucking word. No. So what had happened is I'd hemorrhaged a retina and the blood pooled up behind my pupil, and that wouldn't allow my eye to be able to see it. It's basically like a little patch, and it didn't look black or anything. It was just, there was no vision.
Just like a hollow spot.
Yeah. And so they did the assessment of my eye, and they're like, hey, listen, an eye injury in flight school is a disqualifier. And they said, we can reclass you to a different warrant since you already went through the warrant officer course, or we can just medically drop you. And I was like, fuck, I'll take a medical drop, because I'd already done all the infantry shit. To tell you the truth, I wasn't interested in that route.
Yep.
Because I mean, the only warrant position would be like a SF warrant that I might be interested in. And so yeah, I think about that too. Is like, fuck, was there a high tension wire somewhere with my name on it? Because you know how many helicopters were lost in the course of the war.
Yeah, I've lost more friends from V-22 crashes and helicopter crashes than combat. Like those things kill guys by the dozens,
And so I think about the same thing. Is like, fuck, dude, is it destiny? Is it just by luck? Who knows? But that wasn't my path.
Yeah, and coming to a place of acceptance is like the most difficult thing we do in life, is accepting what is, right? Because especially for guys like us who are kind of men of action, who take things into our own control and make things happen, sometimes when it doesn't happen the way you want to, it's difficult to make peace with that. Yeah.
And exactly like in your case, like you said, every variable that you had control over, you fucking performed at the top level.
Absolutely.
Like, you took that opportunity and then you ran with it. And then the things that are outside of your control still get you.
Yeah.
you know?
And that's a reoccurring lesson through my life. And I figured out that the universe keeps sending you a lesson over and over again until you learn it. And then once you learn it, you stop getting those lessons sent your way.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I love that you said the universe, because that's my language these days.
It is.
You know, you can attach it to a God or energy or whatever, but there are things happening that are bigger than us.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And through my journey, I have absolutely realized that. I was that guy all through my 20s and 30s who's absolute atheist. Like, if it can't be proved by science, is woo-woo bullshit.
Yep,
right?
me
Like
too, bro.
It's like data. Anybody who believes in this kind of stuff is just out there on the fringe, a kook at best, right? Like, I've come full circle on that one. I really, I see it differently. So
I love hearing that, because but that's also, I think, part of the journey of a man or of a warrior. It's like, when you're young, you're not worried about big picture. No. You're worried about what's right in front of your face, and you want to just get after it.
Yeah. You want to have your fun, right? You want to have your adventures and make your mark in the world and become somebody and do all these rah things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it just appealed to me as a young guy. Right. So, doing the hardest and most difficult things just appealed to my sensibilities. Go be a Marine, go be an infantry guy, go be a fighter, but like, try to do amazing things. And if I can take anything in kind of solace to that, is that a lot of guys will sit around and talk about, man, that would have been cool. I would have loved to have been a pilot. I didn't get to do it for a career, but I got to do it for a season, right?
Yeah.
And when I lay in bed at night, I can say, at least I did that. Like, I've touched the controls of a jet by myself and taken it into the air and done crazy loop-de-loops and spins and all the fun stuff, right? Like, I don't have to wonder what it was like. I got to do it.
Yeah.
And so I can at least say that, right? So,
and then the other side of it is a lot of people are living in the coulda, shoulda, woulda realm.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, none of that applies. You fucking went and did it. And like I said, the shit, the intangibles, the thing that are outside of your control, that's going to dictate what happens in our lives. But like, so many people throughout my life have come to me and been like, man, I wish I would have done that. Man, I wish I would have done this. And it's like, dude, you're only 30. Like, go do that shit then. Yeah, but a lot of people are just apprehensive about taking those steps to make shit happen.
And it's hard work, but you have to embrace the work, right? The struggle is the path. Like,
yeah,
you have to.
The struggle is also the reward.
It is, the myth of Sisyphus, the guy who's cursed to push the boulder up the hill for the rest of his life, for all eternity. And as soon as it gets to the top of the hill, it rolls back down again, right? Like, you got to get to the point, like, if you're that guy pushing something up to the top of the hill, once it gets to the top of the hill, at some point, you're going to have to push that motherfucker over yourself and start again, because you can't rest there. Like, you have to have something to push against.
Yeah.
And so over the last, especially since I retired last year, I'm feeling that acutely. Like, what do I have to do in life? Like, what's my mission? What's my purpose? And trying to find that, because I've always felt like a guy who's had a purpose or a mission or something to work towards. And I didn't have that for a while. And that was a big part of, like, kind of when I say I was losing my way or feeling that, was not having that. So,
yeah, bro, it's super important.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll unpack that in depth.
Yeah.
But so when you got told you're no longer qualified to fly, did they offer you like to get out of the Air Force, or how did that work?
No, they actually wanted to retain me, and I wanted to stay in because, at this time I'm like almost 8-9 years of active duty. Got it. And
yeah, you're halfway there.
I'm a first lieutenant looking at captain soon, and my wife is pregnant with our first one on the way. It's like this is a career, right? I want to do this. And so I went down to the Air Force Personnel Center there at Randolph, and they have a big office there that has the career managers for all the Air Force specialties, right? So kind of like an HR department where each MOS has its own officer guy, and you can go in and talk to him. So I talked to a couple different guys from career fields, and then came across a security forces guy. And so I'm talking to him, and he's looking, he's like, oh, you're in the infantry, you're in the Marine Corps, like, you like all this stuff. And he's like, hey, we have this unit called the 820th Security Forces Group out at Moody Air Force Base. And it's the most infantry-like unit the Air Force has.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's there at Moody, and there's 3 squadrons, which would be basically like company size. So it's a battalion size. So each squadron is a company. And they go to austere airfields. Their mission is to not only support the base, but immediately outside the base. So they do combat patrols, operations. They have up-armored Humvees, Mark 19s, and 50 cals, and everything else. So I was like, hey, it's not the Marines, but good enough, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, he's like, hey, pararescue selection, and there's a AFSOC community at Moody Air Force Base. So if you want to move that direction, you're there. You can start making connections and whatnot. I'm like, hey, that might be a good opportunity, a good way for me to go, because I still had that drive to do something.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I go out to Moody and get assigned to the 823rd Security Forces Squadron, right as my squadron was deploying over to Kirkuk at the time. So I hadn't been through security forces school or anything. So they left me as a stay behind officer to watch all the guys who couldn't deploy or whatnot. And as soon as the squadron came back, it's like, hey, here's your slot for school. So I go off to school at Camp Bullis in Texas. And during one of the training evolutions, I fell off the top of a Humvee and I put my arm out and I wrenched my shoulder super bad. And rewind this back. So as I was getting out of the Marine Corps, I started training jiu-jitsu in Huntington Beach.
Well, hopefully it was electric jiu-jitsu with Joao Assis.
No, the one that's on Bolsa Chica and Warner Avenue right there. I know exactly what that. But at the time, I don't think he was there.
Yeah, no. So, that's where I got my black belt, in that room.
In that room?
Yeah, right there in the corner of ththose two.
I always wanted to drop in there because every time I drive down to the beach to go surfing, I pass right by.
Yeah.
I go down Warner to Sunset.
That's awesome.
So, it was a small world. So I was doing jiu-jitsu with a guy, and I'm a kind of a big guy, and he wasn't a big guy, but he was a purple belt, and he was training for competition and whatnot, and there weren't a lot of other big guys to go against. And I was really inexperienced, and he rolled me up in an omoplata so fast I didn't know what happened, and it grossly dislocated my left shoulder.
Oh, shit.
Tore my labrum, my rotator cuff, everything. They put me back together, had surgery, I was okay. But fast forward a couple years later, when I'm down there training in the Air Force, it's that same shoulder, man, just absolutely blew it out. So they scheduled me for surgery. I have one. That military doctor absolutely butchered me and precipitated 2 more surgeries.
Fuck, man, I've heard that story so many times.
Over the next 2 years, I had 2 more shoulder surgeries. So now I'm in for 4 surgeries on my left arm. And then there was a reduction in force coming right around 2003, 2004.
I hope you got a good percentage on that.
It wasn't much, man. So the group commander called me in, the colonel, and he's like, "Hey, Chris, I want to talk to you." I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "Hey, there's a reduction in force here, and we're going to have to let go 3 officers from the career field. And since you're not deployable and you're hurt and you're a great guy and everything, however, you're kind of useless to the military." And I'm like, it makes sense. I agree, but I didn't like it. And so I unceremoniously got shown the door, like, bye. And
fuck. What year was that?
2004, I think, or 2005.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the end. Bye. We'll see you later.
9 years in.
Yeah.
That's a wrap, huh?
That's a wrap.
When they kick you out like that, does that come with any better or worse benefits, or because you're not getting a retirement?
No, they gave me a severance, like a separation severance, which wasn't a lot. And then I got a little bit of disability because when I was in the Marines, I had both of my knees scoped, and then I had the shoulder surgeries and stuff. So I got like a 40% disability rating. It's not a lot, but it's better than a sharp stick in the eye at the end of the day. So,
dude, I say this about disability because a lot of veterans are reluctant to get that because they just don't feel like they earned it. Or
there's dudes without arms and legs. I'm going to whine about the fact,
yeah.
No, man, you feel bad about that.
Yeah, but at the same time, bro, you did your part. And how much money is the government stealing from you on a regular basis? Yeah. And if you can get a check for $1,700 a month or whatever based on everything you gave, don't fucking feel bad about that for a second, dude. So then it's like, okay, what's next?
So left the military. My wife is pregnant with our second one. And what am I going to do, right? So that was kind of the first crisis I was in, like coming up on 29, 30 years old. And all I knew was the military, right? Like that was my life. And I was like, well, I guess I go to civilian world now. And so I got a job here at Boeing, and I worked at Boeing for about 6 months.
What brought you up to the Pacific Northwest?
So at the time, my dad was still flying for Japan Airlines. He got out of the Air Force, and he was flying 747s and based out of Anchorage with my stepmom. And then my wife's parents were still in Huntington Beach, and we can't afford to live in Huntington Beach.
No, man.
I would love to, but we can't. And then my parents lived up in Alaska, and that was a little too extreme for my wife. But my wife had some cousins that were really close, more like sisters than cousins, and they all lived in this area, and they all had kids that were about our kids' age, so we can raise our kids with family and stuff. So we settled here, and then as we were coming up here, I interviewed with Boeing, and they snatched me up right away. And about 3 or 4 months into that job, I realized it's a good job, but it's the wrong job for this guy. And I never had a job that I hated in my life, and I came to despise that job. And I wanted just to jab a pencil in my eyeball every day. Just
I mean,
sitting
fuck,
there,
dude, you're flying fighter jets, and now you're what? Just riveting a fucking.
No, I was working in program management.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I wasn't even a union guy. Like I was like headquarters, like assigning people to programs and developing these things, and it was an office job, wearing a suit and a tie. And on Monday morning, we would have a meeting to plan all the meetings for the next week coming up. That could have been an email, and there were meetings about meetings, and half the meetings I had to go to I didn't even know what they're talking about. I had no business being there. But I was like, this cannot be my life. And then the traffic, driving up down the 167 every day, 3 hours in traffic, just like, this can't be my life.
Yeah.
And my wife says, the city that we lived in, the actual part of town we were in was unincorporated county. It wasn't actually a part of the municipality, but they were annexing the place where I lived into the city, and they were hiring like 15 or 16 new police officers. And my wife was looking through like the local newspaper, and they said, hey, the police department's hiring. And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I get to wear a uniform. I can drive fast. I'd be around like that camaraderie like we had in the military. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds a lot more exciting than Boeing. Yeah. And so I went and I applied, and I came out number one on the list, and they offered me a job. And so I said goodbye to Boeing and took probably a 35% pay cut. However, I was a lot happier. And going into the law enforcement, it never been something that even occurred to me, like never appealed to me, like this could be a career opportunity. However, like I thought, I got 2 young kids. I live here in this city. I can be a police officer in this town. Like I can make my home and my community safe. It won't even be like going to work. I'm just going outside of my house to make sure my neighborhood is safe. Right. Uh-huh. And I really had that feeling and that connection, like of this idealistic thing that law enforcement was as I went into it. And I ended up working the district that my house was in a lot of times too. So everyone I came in contact with was either a neighbor or someone who I knew through 3 or 4 degrees of separation. Right. So I always had that in the back of my mind as I'm doing my policing, is that I'm talking to my neighbors. I'm talking to maybe my kids' friends' parents or something, right? Like these are people that I respect, that I'm here to serve and to be there. Like I wanted to be the hero. I've always wanted to be the hero, right? So to go out. And
I think that's exactly the right mentality to want to be a police officer.
Yeah, absolutely. It was to provide a better life for my family and my community, and to be a part of that, and to stand on the wall as that sentinel watching out for everybody. And so I started doing that, and I really enjoyed it right away. And about 3 years in, as soon as I was eligible, they had an opening for the Valley SWAT team, and I applied for it, and I got on the team briefly, and I was like, fantastic. And about 7 or 8 months into that, the team leaders were readjusting the PT standards, right? So it was kind of an antiquated test. And so a couple of guys on the team were big CrossFit dudes. And I'm not a CrossFitter, but some of the events within the new PT test were going to be like deadlifts and kind of a circuit kind of deal.
Stuff that's super applicable to being a cop.
Yeah. Okay. And so having never done deadlifts or anything or anything like that, it's like, I'm going to have to get good at this because it's something within my control.
Yeah.
So I'm going to max this out and do as best I can. And so one day I'm up in, have you ever been to our department there?
No.
Okay.
No.
So the gym is upstairs, and there's also a briefing room, and the department's kind of split into 3 levels, and there's a basement level, there's like a main lobby, and then there's up above, there's the briefing room and a small gym. And it's a Sunday afternoon, and I'm in the gym doing a circuit right before, I was working graveyards at the time. So it's like 6, 7 o'clock at night on a Sunday in the summertime. So it's still light out, and I have the music up and doing my circuits. And about the 3rd or 4th round through, I'm doing my deadlifts, and I'm about 6 or 7 reps in, and I go to yard up that deadlift, and God, I thought I got shot or something. I'm sure my back was rounded like the St. Louis Arch. It was terrible. I landed on the ground, and I was like, oh my God, what happened? Like I had never experienced pain like that in my entire life. It was unbelievably painful. And I thought my back was broken. I was like, I can't move. And so I was like, okay, I can wiggle my toes. That's a good sign. And I went to stretch out my legs, and I lost consciousness. I was like a lightning bolt had hit me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a bad way. And then as I sat there, the first thing that goes through my mind, I'm like, I'm going to be like Joe the cop from Family Guy in a wheelchair. Yeah. I'm going to be that dude. And then I was like, how am I going to get myself out of here? Right? Because I'm way up here, and there's nobody on my crew who works out. It's a Sunday evening. Nobody's going to be in that gym until Monday, maybe when a detective comes in at like 7 or something. So I'm stuck. I can't call for help. Nobody's going to hear me. I have no communication. I'm like, fuck, man, I'm stuck. So I look up and there's a shelf in there where I put my cell phone, and it might as well have been on the moon because I'm on the floor and I'm looking at the sun.
Yeah.
I can't get to that. So I'm able to very slowly crawl my way over to the elevator, just a little bit at a time, really being careful not to stretch my legs or move my back at all. Because anytime I did, it was like electricity, just zap. Hit the button, door opens. I go to crawl myself in, and of course I don't get in fast enough. The door's closing on my legs. I'm like, God dang it. I go ding, first floor opens. I start crawling out, and for whatever reason, one of the detectives had a case that he had to file or whatever, and he was coming up.
He's like, what the fuck are you doing, dude?
And he's like, you all right, Chris? I'm like, nah, man, I'm pretty far from all right. And he's like, gets on his detective radio, and he calls for the fire department to come and rescue me out of the police department, which was absolutely embarrassing.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's like the worst thing. So I'm laying there on the floor in the hallway, and when they picked me up to put me on the stretcher, I lost consciousness again. Anytime I moved, like when people talk about 10 out of 10 pain, that was the first time I'd ever experienced that. Like, you can't think, you can't do anything. It's just anything else other than just laying perfectly still and like trying to maintain just sends you into agony. And so I went down there. I had fully ruptured my L5-S1 really bad. And so about 3 or 4 weeks later, they had me in surgery to do a disc replacement, and they go through your stomach on that one.
Oh, fuck all that, dude. So you're just reiterating why I stopped doing deadlifts, because it's like, I used to be on I'm going to try and get as big and as strong as I can. And then I had several scares like that, not to that degree, but to where twang, and then you can't even tie your shoes for 3 weeks. Yeah. And it's like, what am I really trying to accomplish here?
Absolutely. And, before I hurt my back, I always thought people who were, had back injuries or whatnot or claimed back injuries were totally malingering. Like, you're full of shit. There's no way it hurts that bad. Like, what do you mean you can't do any of this? And sure enough, once it happens to you, like, you can't sleep, you can't walk, you can't eat, like, nothing feels comfortable. Everything hurts. And to combat that pain, of course, they just hand you handfuls of Dilaudid and every other kind of narcotic you want and you can get. And so you go about life and go on. So fortunately, I was still relatively fit and healthy and everything. And I recovered pretty quick. About 4 months later, I was back on light duty. And I think within 5.5 months, I was back on full duty.
What did they put in as a synthetic disc?
So what they do is they cut your stomach open, kind of like on the opposite side of an appendectomy, about that same location. And they put this like metal tube, basically a portal down to your spine. So they move all your guts aside. And then they remove all of the disc tissue. And then they put it's like a polymer disc that goes to the top of one vertebrae and the bottom of the other, and has a little metal ball and socket in there. So it allows range of motion on there rather than just fusing everything together with some plates and screws. Yeah. So it should allow movement. And so I had that surgery, and that was a painful evolution. Back surgery is not fun. And then about 3 months after that, that I got back on full duty, I got in a foot pursuit with this dude, and it was dark night, and it was behind this crappy apartment complex, and there was one of those little storm retention ponds, but the fence was broken, and it just looked like a flat field to me.
Fuck, I already know where this is going.
I'm running, and I'm like, boo, like coyote, man. It was like a 4.5 foot drop just straight down. I thought the ground was going to be there, and I just smack. I hit the ground, and I'm like, oh my God, my back. I can't move. So move. Okay. All right. It's not as bad as it's been, but goddamn, I'm in a bad position again. And I'm able to self-extricate and get myself back to the car. I'm able to drive to the station and let my ass in. I'm like, Sarge, I got to go home. My back's jacked again. Like, I don't know what happened. And so I go home, spend the next 2 weeks on the couch, not moving. Like, man, this really hurts. And go back to the doctor and like, you're okay. So they give it a couple more months, like, as nothing's fixed. And like, I think we're going to have to fuse you. So I go in for a second surgery, and then they fuse my bottom 2 vertebrae together. So I have 2 big, like, pins and screws and everything holding everything together. And that second surgery, the fusion, like that's the one I think, in retrospect, where everything for me started to go off the rails. Okay. As far as that, because, rewind it back to the original injury, and that's 5 or 6 months of taking a lot of narcotics and everything in the back surgery. And then that second one, again, another 4 or 5 months of narcotics and back surgery pain. And my life, like, when your back hurts like that and you've had surgeries like that, like, your life becomes one of pain. Like, it becomes a constant companion. And I wasn't at that point where you make friends with pains and you won't be alone. Like, I didn't want the pain. And I had to, towards the end of that, I wanted to go back to work full time, right? And you can't can't be at work and strung out on narcotics. So I'm like, I'm going to quit using this stuff and just use Motrin and whatnot and go back to work. And it was a holiday weekend. I think it was like Memorial Day or something. So there's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I saw all my pills were getting low. I'm like, I'm not going to call for a refill. I'm going to go to work on Monday and be hardcore. And I just quit taking the pills. And I woke up one morning and I think I took the last one like on Wednesday or Thursday morning. And then that night I went to bed and I'm like, man, I don't feel super good. I felt like I was getting the flu or something. And I laid in bed and just stared at the ceiling for like 8 hours. Like the clock was just like tick, 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 like one of those all night long. I'm like, man, I can't sleep. What's wrong? And I got up the next morning. I'm like, man, I'm not feeling really good. Like a whole night without sleep. I'm rough. I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. And I went to the bathroom and started shitting myself inside out. And that was going to become my home for the next 4 days. I didn't realize it at the time.
You were fucking dope sick, bro.
I didn't know it, right? Like I couldn't admit it to myself.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, like that's exactly what it was. Like I was an addict and here I am as a police officer. Like I can't say I'm a dope addict, right? Like I've been prescribed all these medicines. I'm fine. I'm good to go.
Well, bro, how many people that are currently addicted to opioids?
So many.
Started with that fucking path.
I don't know how many people I talked to. Like I was in a car crash. My back was hurt. They gave me a lot of pain pills. They stopped the pain pills. I didn't know what to do. And now I'm on heroin, right?
Bro, I heard it every day on patrol.
And it's like, how do you arrest somebody? How do you prosecute somebody for that? Like having been through that myself, like,
yeah, the system's fucking broken, man.
It was. And that was, again, a part of the thing that gave me a different perspective on what was happening. So I got dope sick and I got over that. And goodness gracious, that was a tough evolution, right? And I was like, I'm never going to take another narcotic again. F that. And, but the good thing about that is when I did come across people who did have bad problems, I could talk to them real. It's like, hey man, when's the last time you were clean?
Yeah, you fucking been there.
Yeah. Like, you don't know how bad it is. Let me tell you my story. Like, yeah, man, like I remember laying on the couch and the hair on my arms was sore. Like you can't watch TV, you can't read. Like I remember thinking I would do anything for another pill right now. I would short of killing somebody. I want a pill. And I have a wife, I have 2 kids, I have a beautiful home, I can take a hot shower anytime I want. Like I have everything going for me positively, right?
And your brain is in that same cycle that theirs is in.
But can you imagine, it's the middle of January, you're soaking wet, you're living in a tent underneath a bridge downtown, you're eating like shitty food, everyone you know is strung out. Like how are you going to get clean? How can you tell someone, just stop using drugs? Like,
yep.
It's impossible.
No.
Like it was a monumental task for me with all the positive things I had in my life.
And a good support network of people and shit. Yeah.
And I don't have any more willpower than anybody else, but like I've been able to accomplish some things and put my mind to it. And that was a hard thing to get over. But I'm glad I was able to battle that because it did give me some sympathy and actually a lot of sympathy for others who are in that cycle of addiction. But for me, that kind of sent me on a bad direction because one, I'm always physically in pain. And you talk about, physical, mental, and spiritual, like those pillars that kind of hold our lives. Physically now, coming off of that, man, I'm hurting all the time. I'm not in shape. I'm not working out because it hurts to work out. I'm barely maintaining. So that's off. I don't have any spiritual grounding or understanding. So that part is off. And then,
you're fucking super out of alignment.
Yeah. And then mentally, I'm okay. I think so. I'm hanging in, but, about a year or so after I come back from my back surgeries, I got T-boned when I was running code to a call of a stabbing. Somebody got stabbed in the neck. So medics are going, fire rigs, every cop, is priority call out. And, I'm going up the main road in town, and there's a big intersection. And as I'm coming northbound, I see coming eastbound, there's the medic rig and a fire engine. And I'm like, oh, we're going to collide in this intersection. So as I'm coming up and it's super heavy evening traffic, so I stop, they stop. And I look at them and the fire engine waves me through from the left. So I look to the left. Okay, if the left is clear, they're stopped. I look to the right and I start going to make sure my right traffic is cleared. And there was a guy driving a Ford F-350 jacked up with one of those big iron cross bumpers, drunk and high, coming eastbound too. And he goes around the fire truck and the ambulance, goes around both of them into the turn lane to go through the intersection. And as I'm coming through the intersection, he just, boom, right into the window of the car. Knocks me completely unconscious, spins the car out across the intersection.
Bro, you got a pretty gnarly story, dude.
It's freaking nothing but accident prone, right? Just like disappointment. And
so you're living up to your name, Baja?
Baja, yeah. Except I keep breaking myself, right? And the next thing I remember is waking up in the back of the medic rig. And like just screaming headache and everything. My legs were killing me. Like I didn't know what had happened. And then I recognized my buddy's face. He was there. I'm like, okay, there's Tyler. There's some other guys. I'm like, okay, like what happened? Hey man, you've been in a car wreck. I'm like, all right. Like, all right, I'm alive. I'm good. He's like, we called your wife and everything. We let him know you're okay. So they took me up there, had a bad concussion, and both of my legs were bruised. I had a perfect imprint of my right hip of my holster and then the left side of the armrest. I was in Crown Vic at the time. So that jacked up truck, man, just like the top of that bumper just smacked me. I chipped a tooth. My jaw was never right. My neck still hurts from that. But the thing that had happened after that, well, it turns out that the call was bogus, right? It wasn't even a tone out. The first units get there, it's like, hey, shut everybody down. This isn't a stabbing. Like everybody can go home. So it was a bullcrap call to begin with that I was running code to that I almost bought the farm on, right? So I was like, wait a second, what am I doing here? And then the collision review comes out and says, hey, you're at fault. I'm like, you didn't clear the intersection. You had a red light and you went through and caused a collision. I'm like,
yeah.
Well, fair enough.
Of course you're at fault, you know?
Yeah. I'm like, and here I am just trying to do my best and everything.
What does that mean though? Did that have any?
No, it's not for insurance or anything, but like if you have so many collisions, that are preventable or that you're at fault, like you could start getting in trouble for it. So nothing happened to me, but just the idea, like I didn't feel like I did anything wrong. And I took as much due diligence and care as I possibly could while still operating an emergency vehicle. And this dude driving this truck who was DUI and high passed emergency vehicles with the lights on.
Come on now. Yeah.
But I should have still seen that, And so I was a little bitter about that, but in the end, I wasn't. It didn't do anything to me, right? However, about a month after that collision, I started having nightmares, really bad nightmares. And it wasn't about the collision. They were the nature of I'm in uniform and I'm completely helpless. Like my feet are stuck in concrete. Like I can't move. I'm watching things happen and I have no control to do anything. I'm watching my friends get killed or bad situations. I'm trying to do something and I can't engage. I can't do anything. I'm just paralyzed. And it messed with me really bad. And there was a couple calls in particular that really stuck with me that were coming up frequently in my dream cycles. And it got to the point where like, I didn't want to go to sleep, man. Like, and my body's still in pain from my back surgeries. Like I'm not feeling right from the concussion.
So you think that like the TBI or the concussion sparked something in your brain to just...
Yeah, I think it maybe opened something or just that incident was the catalyst that just started, hey, that closet at the end of the hallway where I've been stuffing all my shit for a long time. Yeah. Like that wreck broke that door, the lock on that door.
The door's wide open now.
And then stuff is coming out and it's coming out in my subconscious while I'm sleeping. Right. And it's bothering me to the point where I'm waking up at night, just in a cold sweat, yelling. My wife's like, are you okay? Like, I'm not feeling good. Right. And I'm like, you feel like something's fundamentally wrong with you. You're like, what is wrong with me? Like, why do I feel like this? And so I started self-medicating with alcohol because I was done with the narcotics. I'm like, let me just drink. And I started drinking enough, just to take the pain and the edge off my body after a long day. And then at nighttime to go to sleep and not dream. I just drink myself to pass out. Like I don't want to feel anything anymore. And it got to the point where I never want to feel anything at all, ever, because the only thing I was feeling was this negativity and just anger and just like my internal reality was becoming very dark, right? And then of course my external reality was going to reflect that. It's
for sure.
It absolutely attract what's inside of you. And so when we talk about law enforcement being kind of a negative entity, it's not like I was a bright spark of joy and all of that. Like, I complained in briefing and bitched like everybody else. And I was upset with the system and things that were completely out of my control. And like, I got disillusioned very quickly from the idealistic kid I was when I first started the job to 7 or 8 years in going, man, what are we doing here? Like,
bro, and I don't know, I say it all the time on the show. I don't know a cop that has 5 to 10 years in that doesn't feel that.
Yeah.
Because the system in which you're operating under is just, when you just take a step back and detach and look at it objectively, it doesn't fucking work.
No.
And
you see it firsthand, right? And if you're like me, just normal Joe Blow growing up in the suburbs, you think like the justice system is working flawlessly, a well-oiled machine. Until you get into it and you're like, oh my God, like if people
fucking train wreck
only knew. And I spent so much time, not educating, but just having conversation with my neighbors and stuff. And especially as a cop, right? Like, yeah, I live here, and they're like, do this. I'm like, yeah, here's the reality of what's happening. And they're like, really? Like, they're shocked when you explain to somebody how the system actually works. They have no idea.
Yeah.
And
then on top of so many things in the system being broken, I swear that law enforcement abides by the fuck up, move up policy, where the shittiest people get to be promoted to leadership positions.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it's because guys that have humility, or guys and gals that have humility, you're not clawing each other's eyes out trying to get that promotion.
Yeah.
Like, hey, the promotion will come when it'll come, right? As long as I do the right thing and I'm winning and I'm succeeding. But that's not really how it's set up. Like, promotions in the law enforcement world are sought after, and you have to put your packet in, you have to test, and you have to go to the board. And it just seems like the wrong people are chasing that.
Yeah, for the wrong reasons too. Like,
yeah, exactly. Because you want to get a pay raise.
Pay raise, right? And people have to realize, like, coming out of the military, like, I had the kind of the expectation that you're supposed to promote, right? That you're supposed to move up in rank and whatnot. But in the police world, it's different. Like, if you enjoy patrol, you don't have to move into supervision, which is a sergeant. It doesn't mean you're not as advanced or competent. The sergeant isn't more experienced, because there are guys who are sergeants at 6 or 7 years, and there's guys who've worked patrol for 20, right? Like, it doesn't make one guy better than the other. But we've had a couple of guys over the years where, in the department that I worked at, where they were begged by their crews to put in for promotion, right? Like, those guys who didn't want it, who were like the de facto leaders that everybody looked up to, are the best leaders. They truly are, because they're not there for themselves. Like, you can trust a guy like that
for sure,
that that you've worked with, who's out there doing the do. And it's the same thing in the military, man. Like, guys who just re-enlist and hang around, get promoted, and you're like, I remember being a young Marine going, God dang, man, why is this guy in charge? Well, because he's re-enlisted twice. Like, that's why he's in charge.
Yeah.
He's an idiot, though.
No, I mean, real leadership should be a burden.
It should,
like, it shouldn't be something that you're necessarily, I mean, I guess you could be excited about it, but you should know that, like, it's bigger than you. The reason I'm filling these shoes is for one reason and one reason only, and it's to take care of these people.
Yeah, to be a servant. You have to be a servant leader. And if you don't have that mindset going in, you're destined for failure, right? And I've seen both hands. I've seen good leaders and bad leaders, and universally, the good leaders are the people who put their men first, right? They go out there and they show up and they lead by example, and you genuinely feel like they care about you. They might tell you something you don't want to hear, but it's a lot easier coming from someone that you trust, right?
For sure,
so,
dude.
If there's a sergeant who comes to me and says, hey, I need you to go ahead and assault the gates of hell with me today, I'd be like, Roger that, man. Where do you want me in the stack? And there's some people, hey, I need you to go do this. I'm like, I don't think so. Not today. Not for you. So
they're just waiting for an opportunity to hang out to dry.
Yeah. There's some people I trust implicitly and some people don't. And then that goes, with everything. So
for sure.
But when you deal with stakes that are a little bit higher, like careers and possible jail time and your own life and the lives of the citizens you deal with, I mean, it becomes more crucial. Like, you have to have the right people in those positions. You can't have guys who don't know how to take action or to be a leader, especially when the chips are down, when the active shooters start, or there's some kind of crazy incident that kicks off, and you have an impotent leader who's great on paper, might be a great people person, but has no tactical experience or leadership. And it's the second something big kicks off, the first thing they do is they look to the guy on the crew who everybody looks to and like, what do we do?
Yeah.
So it's like, that should be the dude in charge, So I don't know where we went off the rails on that, but
that's what we do on the podcast. It's awesome though.
Yeah. So so the night, like, going back to how the nightmare started affecting me in the drinking, and just that negative energy flow that keeps coming into your life, and I found myself in that position, like, feeling like I was a drain to everybody around me. My energy was so negative, and just the way, like, my heart had become was incongruous with who I knew I was. Like, I grew up, like, even though my childhood was very traumatic and everything, I was always a sensitive kid and very empathic. Like, I feel other people's energy, and it's hard for me not to internalize that, to take it on me. So, every call I went to, not every single one, but the emotional ones, like, I felt very deeply inside of my heart, and I didn't have a way to deal with that. And I just negative call after suicide, after multiple fatality, car wreck, after just frustrating call, after going here and being called a racist, and like all these things are like just eating at my soul. And again, with the nightmares, like I couldn't process it. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, my family hates me. My community hates me. Like I am just a blight and a burden to everything. And it was just insidious, right? And it's like
and the more you tell yourself that,
it's a
the more you start to believe it. And then the other side of that, it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And I saw that firsthand. And ultimately, through my unhealthy behaviors and everything, it led me to the point of sitting in the woods out at Greenwater Lakes, way off the trail with my service pistol in my hand, with my gun up against my head. And the thing that happened to me there is kind of what brings me here to talk to you today. It was about 4.5 years ago. And I sat there in the woods, and my family was out of town for the weekend. And I'm like, I'm going to check out. I'm done.
How old were your kids at the time?
I think my daughter she was almost 17. So like maybe 10 and 12.
Okay.
So,
and then the fucked up thing, because I've been sitting in my car having that same conversation with myself, and I'm going to bet you came to the same conclusion that it's like, they'll be better off without me.
Absolutely. Like I told my wife that, I'm like, you guys would be way better off without me.
Isn't that fucking nuts?
Like, and she's like, what are you talking about? Like, but for me, like, it seems so obvious. It seems so rational, right? Because
you're negative, you're bringing them down.
Yeah. This is the right thing to do. This is the reasonable thing to do. Like I'm a reasonable person. I think I use my head, and I'm seeing the signs, and like,
I'm doing them a favor, if anything.
Yeah. I'm irreparably broken, and it's time for me to check out.
All a bunch of fucking lies that our brains tell ourselves to keep us stuck there.
Absolutely. And then if you're someone like me who's, constantly watching the media and the political cycle and like staying up with world events and stuff, like all of that stuff, again, like just compounds and snowballs on top of you. And, I'd reached the end, and it was exactly that lie. Like I'm worthless. Like I've been a disappointment and a failure at everything I've done. I have not been successful. I'm like, my body's in constant pain. I have this agony that's like writhing through me. I didn't know what to do anymore. And I was like, the only way is out. And so I sat there, and I remember, the first thing I did was like, I put the gun to my head. I'm like, just do it. I'm like, fine, I can't do that. Let me think about this for a second. And then I thought about it for a little while. I'm like, let me make sure this thing works. And I put a round right in front of me. Okay, I'm not even going to hear that. I won't feel that. I won't hear there to feel it. And all of a sudden, like, I was like, okay, let's do this. This is it. And so I started breathing real deep. Like that, just in and out, in and out. I'm like, okay. And I thought I was working up the courage to do it. And I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes into this, just like all of that feeling I was feeling inside of me just was so overwhelming. And then all of a sudden, in an instant, I can't explain it, man. I got goosebumps. I
got fucking goosebumps.
I transcended reality. Like I realized that the external world and the internal world were absolutely identical with one another. That everything I was feeling was just a thought, just an emotion, and I could set it down. I didn't have to carry it. I didn't have to be it. Like I felt intimately connected with every living thing, everything in the universe, even the bad things that had happened for a purpose, and it was proper. And I can't explain that state of being, of consciousness that I was in for that moment. It was absolute joy, peace, release, lightness, like the opposite of everything I was feeling that brought me to that place. I got to feel the flip side of the coin, right? Complete freedom, complete release from all of that.
What do you think was the catalyst that changed how you were feeling in that moment?
I can't say what it was. Like, I think it was surrender, honestly. Like I
was going to say, I wonder if like
just complete,
in order to pull the trigger, you just accepted everything, but then through acceptance, it started to give you your freedom.
Yeah. Acceptance or surrender. Yeah. That's what I feel like was like, like that. And then
the other thing that it could have been is like, as you know now, like breathing patterns are one of the most powerful things to reset yourself. I make my kids, like my little kids in jiu-jitsu, if they get taken down hard or they get their arm tweaked and they start crying, 99% of the time, they're not crying because of a physical injury. Yeah. They're crying because of how it affected them psychologically.
Yeah.
So I make them do breath work. I say, you control your breathing, you control everything else.
Absolutely.
And so like, man, you put yourself through this little breath work, almost not even probably understanding what you were doing.
No clue. I'd never done any sort of intentional breathing or anything, but in that moment of doing that, like it snapped, something snapped, right?
It's fucking
like,
fascinating, bro. That's so cool.
And I, for lack of a better word, it was a mystical experience. Like I had no context religiously or culturally to put words to what I had experienced in that moment. And if you ever read like the book, The Power of Now or things like that, like to be so present in this moment that you realize past and future don't exist. It's just now. This is the only moment you have, and you're not defined. The past has no power over you. The thoughts have no power. They're just thoughts, and you can lay them down. All the stuff you're carrying is just baggage that you can set. And so it was that release, that acceptance, the freedom, the surrender to the moment. And a couple things happened. I never touched alcohol again after that. And then I also became a vegetarian, and that was because I felt so connected to all living things. Like, wait a second, what is this?
Wow. So it impacted your life dramatically.
Huge.
What year was this?
This was late 2017 or early 2018. So it was about 4 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago. And so,
by that time you'd been a cop, how many years?
About 9 or 10 years.
Okay.
So it kind of coming up on that mark. And, so as that moment started to end, and my thinking brain started coming back to me, at first I thought, did I kill myself? Like I thought I died, because what I was feeling, like I felt like I'd gone to heaven. Like I had been in the presence of the divine ground, the face of God. I'd seen it. Right. And I walked out of the woods feeling like my feet weren't even touching the ground. Right. And I was like, well, what was that? What did I experience? And then life started coming back, and I started feeling kind of like I normally did, but different, right? There a fundamental shift had changed, and not everything had gone away that brought me there. I still had the baggage I needed to work through, but like I'd seen a glimpse of something that is possible. I didn't know it was there, right? I saw something. And so I started reading voraciously anything I could find on the subject of spirituality, of divine, the mystical experience. From everything was open to me. Like I didn't have any sort of preconceptions on what that was. So any podcast I could hear about spirituality or manifestation or divine experience or religion, I revisited the Bible, the Tao, like everything. And what I kind of came to the conclusion is like they're all using different language to kind of point to the same experience that transcends words or culture or language, right? Like when you stand in that place, it is fundamentally different from ordinary everyday consciousness that we have. And it was fascinating to me. But there was a two-edged sword to that. So I stopped drinking. Like I felt like, oh man, there's a spiritual component to this, but I didn't know what it was. So it wasn't fully developed. But the drawback was that I had to start facing all those demons that I've been hiding from by drinking and running away. And now I had to face them sober, and I had to come out and deal with them.
Yeah.
I had to go to battle with them. Right. So, the nightmare cycle started up again. Right. And so I'm like, okay, so I started learning some techniques like breathing and meditation and stuff. I'm like, okay, these things are helpful. And during my days were feeling really good. Right. And I'm like, okay, man, I'm feeling good. But at nighttime, I was still having the nightmares, and I would get up and I would meditate and stuff. And it would keep coming back though. Like every time I put on the uniform and go to work, and it'd be like another DOA, another fatal accident. I'm like, oh man, like I still didn't know how to process those things. And
I don't know if anybody has the capacity to process that stuff.
Like
over and over and over.
Exactly. And any one thing at a time, like we're all resilient, right? Like if you get beat up and you get hurt and you need a surgery and you come back, hey, no big deal. But like when everything starts compounding on top of each other, right? It eventually some small incident, which would be normally insignificant, becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back. And everyone's like, this thing fucked you up. I'm like, it wasn't that thing that messed me up. That's just the ripple on top of the ocean of things that are unresolved and unfixed in my life. And so I fast forward after that experience. So it was about 4 or 5 months after that. Like, man, I'm feeling really good during the day. And it was a nice afternoon, and I got home from work. I was working day shift at the time, and my mom was at my house. And my kids each had a friend over, and I got home. I'm like, hey, it was like a Saturday afternoon. I'm like, let's go down to the park. We'll have a picnic for dinner. We'll bring the kids and their friends. We'll set up the slack line. We'll bring the ukuleles and we'll play along. We'll have a good time. And so everyone's like, hey, great idea. So we went down to the park and set up everything, and we're having a great time. And I'm watching my kids slack line, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like 20 feet behind that tree right there was a call I went to not too long ago, where a young homeless girl who was holding her baby got beat over the head with a pool cue. And so I showed up. I was the first one on scene with my partner, and this poor little girl is just covered in blood. Her baby's covered in blood. Like it was an ugly scene, right? I was like, oh man, like I don't want to experience this right now. I'm at the park having a great time with my family. Like it couldn't be better. Like, let me just breathe. So I turn around and I face the opposite direction in the field. And this is, again, like when you work and live in the same place, this is the problem, right? And so I'm like, man, let me get rid of that energy. And I'm looking across the field and I'm like, oh man, that's where that double homicide was the day before 4th of July. I remember doing CPR on that girl for a long time. I remember her boyfriend showing up and dealing with him. Like, oh man, that was hard. Let me turn this direction. So I looked towards the third direction in the field, towards the community center at the park. And I remember another call where this little Hispanic girl with her older cousin had come up from a neighboring jurisdiction where they didn't trust the cops because they didn't want to get deported, and says, hey, my uncle's been molesting me when I was a kid and is now molesting my younger cousin. And I was like, oh man.
Everywhere you look, darkness.
Everywhere I looked, right? Like, and this wasn't a dream, right? Like I'm wide awake. I'm conscious. Like this is the first time like this shit's been intruding into my conscious life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And after that point, that light that I had seen before, like faded, right? And I'm right back into this nightmare cycle, right back into like everywhere I'm driving through town, I'm just seeing ugly things. Like there was nothing positive left anymore. And, I'm getting to that point where like I'm feeling useless again. I'm feeling helpless. And my wife's like, why don't you go talk to somebody? You need professional help, right? And so I did. And the first counselor I talked to, I went to like 3 sessions, and he's like, would you be willing to take medications? I'm like, fuck no, man.
Fuck you.
No, man. I don't want to hide from this. I need to deal with it, man. This cannot be masked.
Well, in the like, if that's their solution, we're not the same.
No.
On to the next one.
Yeah. And so, I did go through a couple that really didn't do much for me, right? And their modalities of therapy are, I want to say outdated, but they don't take into the totality of the human experience, right? Of the spiritual element and everything. It didn't work for me, and I knew the medications weren't going to work either. And so I kept reading, and I came across a book called The Spirit Molecule by Dr. Rick Strassman, and it's about DMT.
Okay. And, Rogan's talked about that before.
Yeah, and I think Strassman's actually been on Rogan before. So through all my learning and everything and all the books I was reading about spirituality and stuff, I listened to some of those podcasts where they talked about, mushrooms and DMT and some of these things and their use in traditional cultures and medicine. And I started doing the research on some of the out at Johns Hopkins, they're using microdosing for psilocybin for veterans and PTSD. I think down in Oregon, there's a couple experimental programs and they're having great success, right? And so it's like reading through that book, what they talked about, how DMT affects you. I'm like, that sounds very similar to that experience I had in the woods when I was by myself, like that state of being. And so I didn't know where there's any ayahuasca or anything, which was, the derivative of DMT. However, you can go online and you can get a research chemical called 4-ACO-DMT, which is synthesized DMT, and have it delivered to your house. I was like, well, let me give this a shot.
Is it for research purposes?
It's for research purposes.
Got it. Okay.
So I did some spiritual research, and so I the first time I had used, and I've only used it like probably about 5 times total, and the first time was, it took me exactly to that place I was before, but deeper, right? So, so that it reliably induced that, I want to say, mystical state of being, but it took me out of myself. It allowed me to stop being my ego for a second, and to see the world for what it was and to accept it. And it was a very powerful experience. And I was like, man, this should be our natural state of being. This is how I should feel all the time, because this guy feels loving and open and kind and wants to do nice things for people. And all my anger and resentment, everything's gone. Like all the negative things that I've been holding on to just melts away. And not only that, is is I feel like I get to see the world for what it is, like truly what it is. Full acceptance. And so it was a very powerful medicine. And found another counselor that I started working with, and he's like, hey man, like, what's your issues? And I'm telling him, like, man, I'm still having these thoughts that I want to kill myself, right? Like these things are still intruding into my life. I'm still feeling this cycle up and down. And he kind of explained to me, and he was a lot more in touch with the spiritual. He's like, this kind of a dark night of the soul, man. You're rediscovering who you are. You're trying to work these things out because you're not hiding it anymore. However, the one of those catalysts was the law enforcement, right? Every time I put that uniform on, every time I'm getting re-exposed to these things, it's like it was that kind of that sticking point that was putting me right back in there. And he's like, man, I don't think this job is for you anymore. I'm not going to recommend you go back to work. So I'm like, I got a wife and kids and a mortgage and a life, man. Like, and I'm at this point, I'm like, I'm not qualified to do anything else. I have no other appreciable skills. I'm just a dumb,
a lie you tell yourself.
I'm just a dumb freaking cop, man. That's all I am. Just a dumb patrol cop. Like, nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody wants me. And not only that, is everything I do, I freaking fail at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, they told me you're done. And I was like, okay. So this is June of last year. Like, bye, medically retired. It's not a lot of money, but however, my wife and I are very frugal. So it allowed us to be in a place where, like, hey, we don't have to work for the immediate time being. So take some time for yourself. So for the last 8 or 9 months, I was doing exactly that. Just taking that time for myself, taking time with the family, spending a lot of time in meditation, taking long walks, reevaluating everything in my life. Like what matters, and trying to find center. And it eventually led me to looking up for an ayahuasca retreat. I'm like, man, I've heard so many people talk positively about this and the effects that it has on their life. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I don't have a mission anymore. I don't have a purpose. And I feel like I'm coming to terms with these demons that I've been battling with, but what do I do with it? Like, how do I serve other people? And so,
are you already at the point where you think that was a blessing, him saying,
yes,
you need to walk away from this profession?
Yes. And I didn't want to, because I don't like quitting.
Dude, I say it all the time. I honestly believe law enforcement should be a 10-year career.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know, guys. I don't know the guy, and I'm sure he's out there telling me he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I've been on patrol for 27 years. I was in the profession for 10 years. Every single person that I know is disgruntled and over it before the 10-year mark.
Well before, yeah.
But everybody after the 10-year mark, they are there for all the things you just said. I have a mortgage. I have kids. I'm paying for my daughter's college.
I don't know how to do anything else.
I'm not good at anything else. Yeah. And then all that does is that locks you into another decade of misery.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think law enforcement officers, probably 25 to 35 years old, you're young enough, you're full of piss and vinegar. You want to go out there and you want to save the world. And like, obviously we need some older people with the wisdom to be able to guide and influence and all that. But I think putting the uniform on, kicking doors in, stopping cars, responding to calls, it should be a 10-year period of your life, and then move the fuck on.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not, but someone told me it's either Australia or New Zealand or something like that every 3rd or 4th year, police officers have to take like a 6-month sabbatical. Like you have to be away from their profession. You can't answer phone calls or emails.
It's not a bad idea.
Every 4th year, 6 months off, go away. And that might sound extravagant, especially somebody who has a normal 9-to-5 job and like, wow, you get 6 months off. That must be nice. It's like, come work patrol for 10 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week on shift work in a busy city and see what you see and do what you do, and not need a mental health break after 3 years.
Well, and the thing that I think about is like, we are paid, police officers are paid as a government position, right? So maybe the solution to this is like some type of rotation where you go work at the Park Service or something. Yeah. And it's like, get outside, fucking trail maintenance, like whatever it is, right? There's other government needs. And instead of having those be a full-time job, have that be allocated as the revolving door for police officers to get away from the streets or something, you know? That way you're still putting in your time, you're still working, you're still producing, like you're still earning a paycheck, whatever it may be. But there has to be a better system than just look at misery for 30 years and then see ya. And that's why what's the statistic? Most cops' hearts explode within 5 years of retirement.
Yeah.
Because they've been pumping cortisol through them for 20 years straight.
Absolutely. Yeah,
you know?
And that physiological stress response is a real thing. Like when you have that darkness and that pain inside of you, it'll start manifesting physically within your body. You'll feel it. And yeah, that's absolutely true. So
emotional pain can manifest in the body, but they can know like what types of emotional stress are affecting specific areas of the body and why. And the shit's wild.
Yeah. I can tell you, the direct correlation I have to that is I also had 2 other surgeries while I was on the police department. And one was that toe right there, that's all jacked up. And then the other one was my wrist. And right after my car accident, I was drinking a lot after the back surgeries and stuff, just trying pain relief. And then obviously for psychological relief. And then I started getting this pain in my toes and then my knees and then my knuckles and my hands. And I didn't know what it was. And after a while, it got to a point where I couldn't walk anymore. And I went to the doctor and he's like, "Oh, you have gout." And I'm like, I thought that's something old people get. Like, what do you mean I have gout?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Gout. So he's like, "Yeah, I'll go away in a week or 2. Here's some medicine to clear it up." And it really didn't do much for it. But like the symptoms I had presented as gout. And he's like, "Yeah, that's what it is." Well, it kept coming back, and it kept especially into that right big toe. And keeps coming back. And I noticed that these cycles that I was going through with my dreams and just like those ups and downs of like the depression cycle coincided with what I was feeling in my body, to the point where I had to have that toe operated on, and they did a radial osteotomy on me. And I go to one doctor, he's like, "It's gout." And I go to another, he's like, "No, your levels are fine. We did a blood test. No, it's psoriatic arthritis. No, it's this. No, like every doctor I talk to says it's either this or this, and they keep going back. Nobody knows, but my joints are all getting destroyed. They're all eating themselves up. The cartilage is disappearing, and I'm getting red and inflamed, and it hurts all the time." And since the last 2 years, my attacks have been maybe once every 6 months versus once a month, right?
Okay.
So it absolutely was stress related. Like just in that constant stress cycle was producing these things. I'd break out with canker sores in my mouth, and then all of a sudden my body would just be racked in pain to the point where I'm needing surgeries to fix all my small joints that are just being eaten up. And it had like, I can't think of anything else it was. And the doctor's like, "Well, you need to cut out alcohol and red meat." I'm like, "Bro, I'm a vegetarian and I don't drink, man.
Yeah.
That's not it." So I did everything I could to help ameliorate any of those conditions I was having. But the thing that was causing it was the proximal cause was the stress. It was absolutely a physiological reaction. Like I just had that feeling in the pit of my stomach all the time, and just that anger just built up in the body. So,
dude, I tell people all the time that are cops, because again, a lot of cops tell themselves like, I couldn't do anything else. This is my career, but they don't want to be there. Right. Yeah. And it's like, you don't realize the weight of the profession until you walk away from it.
Absolutely.
You set your gear, you drop your bags, and it's like, oh, this is what it feels like not having both the emotional weight, but also the actual physical weight of putting that gear on and sitting in a patrol car for 10 or 12 hour shifts. And it's like, you don't understand what that's doing to you until you put it in the rearview mirror. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel. Yeah. You know,
like normal again. Like you always get a new normal after a while. And that I felt that leaving the military too, right? Like every time you make that change in life, like you're setting something down that becomes so familiar to you. And for me, those things had become a part of my identity. I identified being a Marine or as a pilot or as a police officer, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a part of who I was.
Instead of something you did.
Yeah. It wasn't just a day job, right? It was a part of me, my mission. And to separate yourself from that, it takes a little time, right? And I wasn't one of those guys who could just like go in and punch the clock and go home. Like I cared about what I was doing.
Yeah.
I wanted it to matter. I wanted it to be meaningful and to have a purpose. And I felt like so much of it was just a revolving door there was no end to it. It was interminable, and there was not going to be any happy outcome at all.
Yeah. But dude, on one hand, it's like, I talk to people often and say like, dude, don't let the job define you, right?
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is like, that's kind of indicative of you really pouring your heart and soul into it, which is a good thing for a police officer to do at the same time, because you're putting a level of importance and you're actually taking what you do extremely serious,
Yeah. but if you don't have that balance, right? Like when that disillusionment comes, when you've been taking it seriously, that messes with you. It really does.
So what was that journey like then? Like kind of coming to acceptance that is now the past and we're looking forward.
Yeah. It took a little while. Cause like all of a sudden you're just like, for me, it was unceremonious, right? Like they put me out on light duty and I never went back to the stations. Like, so I didn't go back and say goodbye to everybody and there was no farewell or clean out your locker, like last day, sign off on patrol. It was just like, that was it, man.
So you almost felt like me getting fired then.
just bye. And I actually talked to a buddy of mine the other day. He's retired from another agency, and he's like, man, when I was a cop, I thought I had a lot of friends. And he's like, now that I've been out for 6 or 7 months, I realized I had a lot of acquaintances. There's one or two guys I still talk to, but everybody else, like, you know, you guys get along, you text each other because you see each other on the daily, but once you're outside, you're like, bye. So your circle is very small.
And I tell people all the time, it's like, I know you feel like you're this super important addition to the team, but the day you leave, the machine just keeps chugging along without you, and you are not fucking missed.
Nope.
You know?
And when you're around long enough, you can see that, right? You see a chief come and go. Like this guy's been here for 30 years and then pours his heart and soul into it. And then he retires. And then 5 years later, there's a bunch of new cops there. Half the department's new and they don't even know who that guy was. They don't care, right?
It's irrelevant.
Yeah. And my buddy always says, you know, the law enforcement's a harsh mistress. Like you love it, but it doesn't love you back. Right? Like,
I like that.
Yeah,
dude.
not at all.
Yeah, that's a true statement for sure.
And there were elements to the job that I loved. I mean, most of my coworkers to a person, like I really enjoyed working with those guys. Most of the people had their hearts in the right place, and that there wasn't many that I wouldn't go into any call with, right? Like, most guys are there for the right reasons. So,
and I tell people that all the time on the show, because it's a big misconception, especially over the last 24 months, that like police are racist, they're pieces of shit, they're this, they're that, and like defund them and fuck the police. And it's like, you know what? In my experience, most cops are good people.
Absolutely.
Period. You know, and people that say otherwise just haven't been around the profession.
Yeah.
You know.
However, like over the last 2 years, it did make me think, like, because I saw a lot of people do things that I didn't think they would do, and especially nationally. I'm like, what are we doing as a profession? Like, I really.
Well, when I say good people, I mean, I don't mean great police officers. Yeah. I mean, like, they're good-hearted people.
Exactly.
They could be your neighbor, and you would like enjoy them being your neighbor.
Yeah, you'd be friends.
But at the same time, I think a lot of cops don't have what it takes, both physically and emotionally, to be good police officers. Yeah. I think that, and I think those are two different things. You're a good human being, but it's the same thing with the Ranger Regiment. Like, there's lots of people that I would consider good people that are not qualified to be on a fucking squad in the Ranger Regiment.
It takes a certain person.
Yeah. And I think that has been lost in the professional law enforcement, where, and maybe it's unreasonable to think that you can have the standards at the level that I would think they should be at. But at the same time, like, we saw it in 2020, because it's not just a physical standard. It's not, oh, can you climb a fence? What's your mile time? It's like, how do you confront adversity? And are you willing to take a stand? And are you willing to fucking draw hard lines? And are you like, I think part of being a police officer is the ability to just absolutely refuse commands that you think are immoral, unjust, or illegal. Like, not only is that something you should be willing to do, that's something I think you should have to do.
Yeah.
You know? And like, just like you were saying, what did we see over the course of 2020? We saw tons of police officers unwilling to step up and stand their ground. And the thing is, the lunchroom conversations, every single cop, every single fucking cop in the lunchroom. I remember we were watching that guy getting arrested on the paddleboard off of, was he a Malibu?
Yeah. The lifeguard swooping up on him.
Yeah. And it's like, you got 2 or 3 police boats chasing this guy down, and everybody in the lunchroom is like, this is fucking ridiculous.
But here we are doing it.
Why? And that is why, like, I was like, you know what? I can't sit here and just watch this shit anymore. Like, I have to, I'm a fucking free thinking human being. I don't care that this guy signs my check. I have the right to voice something that I think is out of alignment with our profession. And so, like, everybody agrees with what I'm saying, but most aren't willing to say it. That's a problem.
Yeah. And whether it's, holding on for your paycheck or all those things that you tell, like, I can't do anything else. I have to do what I'm told. Like, and when you have that crisis of conscience, and I bet I'm not the only person over the last 2 years or 3 years as a cop who like really went like, what the heck are we doing? Right? Like, it's not just the guys who are the 7-year veterans. It should be everybody at this point, or anybody considering going into the career field. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what's the relationship between law enforcement and our citizenry and everything, which is one of those things that like, I don't know at this point, right? Like, coming out of it's irreparably broken, and I don't think the system will be fixed by the system.
I don't know. The system won't fix itself, because that's not what the system does. The system,
broken by design.
The system is designed to serve the system further, you know? And it's not only, I mean, how far down the conspiratorial rabbit hole do you want to go? But it's like a lot of good cops have been pushed out, and then a lot of new cops being brought in. It's like they want people that will just do whatever the fuck they're told.
Yeah. It works with promotions too. You see guys get promoted who are kind of corporate guys who aren't going to give a lot of pushback, and the guys who are going to stand up and do the right thing or at least offer some resistance to that don't get promoted, right? It's kind of the same thing. So I think any sort of hierarchy doesn't want people within their ranks that are going to question the direction of the ship, right? But
this is the ironic thing about it, is like, the people that are willing to stand up and push back, it's not to push back against them or their department. It's to promote freedom and liberty for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what we should be doing as a police officer. And I say it all the time, like, as a police officer in Seattle, I'm not fucking there to serve Jenny Durkin's wishes. I'm not there to serve Governor Inslee's wishes. Like, we're there for the citizens. That's who our oath is to support and defend their liberties, their constitutional rights.
My neighbors.
Yeah, like, that's not a strange concept. And I shouldn't feel like that idea should be coming from guys that are out on the fringes. Like, no, that's literally like when we swore our oath to office, the things that we said and the things that we took on our heart, you know?
Yeah. And having that perspective, like going in the military, right? When you're a private and going through boot camp, like, you just do what you're told, right? As an enlisted dude. But going through the officer training, they have a lot of classes on, what are lawful orders, what are unlawful orders, and case examples of times you can refuse orders and whatnot.
Yeah, it's literally taught to you.
It's taught to us. Yeah, you have to know the difference, and you have to have the moral character and the courage to push back when it's like, nah, man, we can't do this. It's illegal. This is not right, and I'm willing, whatever consequences or repercussion come, to make a stand. And that's hard to do because you have to be assured of who you are in your heart.
Yeah.
And a lot of us aren't. I wasn't, this whole conversation had been how I didn't know what I was or where I was in my heart. So I don't know, had I been on duty at the time, would I have had the balls to do exactly what you did? I can't say I did or didn't, but I appreciate you doing it, because it certainly gave me the courage to also like, nah, man, I ain't doing this. I never wore a mask once during all of this nonsense. Like, I refused.
And bro, that was like, I was speaking to the profession. That's what that video was for. And it goes back to what we said when we first started. If one or two people can see this and they can be like, you know what, that's how I feel too.
Yeah.
And actually change their behavior, then that's a fucking win.
It's a win. Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
And here's the most bizarre thing about it is, all of my coworkers that were homies, that were friends, that like shared my views, as soon as things started to go south for me, they're like, Greg, you're crazy, dude. You can't fucking say that. What are you doing? Dude, I had a friend call me that night, like, bro, pull that fucking video down. Pull it down. Like, and I'm like, dude, if I can't be authentic to who I am inside of this profession, then
what's the point?
What's the fucking point? And then you fast forward 2.5 years, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah. And not just because like I got like connected with good people or like financially, but it put me on a path where I'm chasing my dreams and my passions now. And that's like you getting fucking fired basically, like they call it mandatory retirement. It's like, see ya, there's the door. But, man, I see it in you too. It's forcing you now to go down a path.
And there's an old saying that fate leads the unwilling and fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling along all the same, right? So your attitude is the only difference between the two, right? Because you're going to go where you're going to go, and you can only choose to accept that or to rage against it. But it's going to be what it is.
Yeah.
And coming to terms with that, like it seems so simple and profound, but it's hard to internalize that lesson to have that acceptance. And so, yeah.
So then, as you continued to kind of like look into the plant medicines,
Yeah.
and you said you ordered the DMT, and you kind of got back to that spot where you felt spiritually fulfilled. And then between that and you coming to the conclusion, I'm going to start offering retreats. Like, what was that portion of the journey like?
So when it comes to that, originally I was supposed to go to my first ayahuasca retreat earlier this year, back in February. And it was a week long, and it's called a Vision Quest. And for 6 or 7 days, I think straight, you're down by the river, and at nighttime you stay by the fire, but you consume ayahuasca like 4 or 5 times during the day for 6 consecutive days. It is basically like a 6-day long ceremony.
That sounds gnarly.
Of consistency. And I felt like I was in a place that I was ready for that. And I called and I'd registered, and they're like, okay.
And that was also in Costa Rica?
Yeah, it's at the same place I ended up going to. And so the one of the medicine women, the founders that were there, she texted me back and she's like, hey Chris, like I know you're interested, and you got to fill out a long questionnaire and a background and everything and kind of be accepted into these things. And she's like, you could come. However, this is going to be a powerful experience. And because you've never experienced ayahuasca, maybe reconsider going to a different retreat. This is going to be maybe a bit intense. And so I sat on that for a while, and I thought, I'm feeling strong, right? Yeah, I've been through boot camp. I've done some stuff. Yeah. I can manage this. I was a Marine. But like there's a voice in the back of my head said, maybe I should listen to this wisdom, right? Maybe they know something that I don't. And so I put it off. And sure enough, the second day that I would have been at the retreat, my biological dad passes away. And I didn't have a lot of contact with him throughout the years. But I had to go deal with all of that. And I would have been, gone and out of the country when that happened, and everything would have got dealt with, but I had to deal with that immediately. So I'm like, okay, it was probably good timing that I didn't go to this. Yeah. And so I ended up scheduling a second retreat, and it was called We the Medicine, and it's at the same retreat center. And so the retreat center is the location, and then they have different facilitators come in and host their week-long workshops and whatnot. And this one is run by David Price, and it's called We the Medicine. And again, it talks about during the week you have all of these different workshops on tapping, havening. I don't know if you know what those are. So tapping is I did not. It's a kind of a self-soothing technique. It's an emotional freedom thing. So you tap on your hand, you tap like in a very specific pattern, and then you tell yourself these affirmations, and it's super soothing. It releases anxiety and stress. And another one's called havening, which is another way of touching yourself and then saying very specific things. And there's tons of research with veterans and people with PTSD that it unlocks when you're traumatized or you have these bad memories or these bad experiences, that memory is also encoded like into your physiology. Mm-hmm. And by reaccessing that and opening that up is you can break those bonds. So you can have the memory without the negative association with it. So like I remember that I was abused by my mom when I was a kid. However, like there's no stimulus to it anymore. It's just the memory. So you're kind of taking control of it. It sounds like. Yeah, you're breaking its power, its hold over you. So you can't get rid of the memory. It's not the whole thing is not about feeling, but it's about feeling properly, about like putting everything into a proper context. So obviously you have the plant medicines, but these other tools that you take with you, learning how to do meditation, learning how to breathe, mindfulness practices, the tapping, havening, are things you can take with you and use in your daily life, which are incredibly powerful. And then on top of that, working with the plant medicines will certainly solidify those experiences and open up everything. So I ended up going to that retreat, and my initial impression was like, here I am, cop, military, like all my baggage and everything. And I'm going with a bunch of civilians, and like, I don't want to be vulnerable in front of all these people. And there's international crew. There's people from all over the world. There was men, women, all ages, and everybody there for their own purposes. And at first I didn't feel like I belonged, and kind of like throughout my whole journey, like I just keep feeling like I don't belong in the places I end up. Yeah. Right? I just keep getting booted out unceremoniously and just kind of leaving and growing up with kid and broken homes and broken families, never feeling like I belonged to anybody particular. I didn't feel like I belonged to that group originally. And so we go into the first ceremony, and we have the ayahuasca, And about halfway through that ceremony, like I feel like I want to throw up. Like I just have this feeling in the pit of my stomach that energy that I've always had, you know, that comes. I felt that very viscerally inside of me. And so I left the circle, because the way this particular place is set up, it's all outdoors in the jungle, right? So it's a covered area, but there's a men's area and a women's area outside the main circle. If you need some alone space, or if you're talking too much or crying or laughing or whatnot, you can just have time. And I spent most of that ceremony by myself, kind of on the outside of the circle, just like dealing with all the things I had to deal with personally. And I'm watching everybody in there having amazing experiences, like, right? Like just out of their minds, you know, happy, joyful and everything. And here I am, like in my conscious mind, I feel like the medicine's not even affecting me at all. Like I'm just processing everything. I'm thinking through all my thoughts, all my emotions, all these things we've been talking about this whole time, and how one incident led to another incident, and like that Rolodex in your mind of all those things. Like, man, I'm having to unpack this, and it's opening me up, and it's like, you have work to do, like, but you're in the right place. Mm-hmm. Going to the second ceremony, the same thing. Like I started feeling that urge, like I don't want these people to see me throw up. Like I don't belong here. I felt close and connected, but I didn't feel a part, right? It was weird. And then going into the third ceremony, like I was like, what's my purpose? Like that's my whole intention for my trip down there, was like, what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? Like, this is what I'm here for.
Were you asked to set an intention, like Tyler talked about?
Yeah, so everything that Tyler was talking about is almost identical to my experience. There's some slight variations just based on location, but the actual ceremony itself is very similar. There's the altar, you come in, everybody shares their intentions out loud beforehand, and then you have a sharing circle afterwards where you talk about it the next day. And it's a very good experience, because you're in this energetic bubble for a week with other people who are kind of, everybody's there for their own purposes. But through the ceremony, it creates kind of a shared experience, right? So you and I and everybody else are in this experience together, having our own experience. So there's the shared corporate part of it. But the importance of ritual, I have learned, is crucial, right? And our whole life is a ritual. You have to live your life as a ritual. And without that intentionality, like, you'll lose a lot. And so everything, like whether you believe in the woo-woo or whatnot, like just honor the ritual for the sake of the ritual.
Yeah.
And that third night, like what the medicine told me is like, hey man, your job is to love everyone and to serve everyone. And that is to remember God. That is to serve God, is to do that. I'm like, how am I supposed to love everyone and serve everyone, man? I don't feel that in my heart. I don't feel like my heart even exists anymore. Like, and it's like, no, man, you have to get out of your head and into your heart. And that 12 inches between the two is going to be the furthest distance you ever travel. And I felt that. And then towards the middle of that ceremony on that third night, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the shaman had stopped playing music, and it was kind of dark. They turned down the lights, and everybody's laying on their mats. And I was one of the only ones still sitting up. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I'm going to sit up here and protect everybody while they're sleeping, while they're in their own spaces, and keep watch, right? Because that's what I want to do. I want to make sure nothing bad. I'm watching over these people. I'll protect them. And there was a couple people having very difficult experiences around me that I could tell, and I could feel that energy. I could feel that emotion within them, and I could feel it within myself too. And it felt like there was like a presence or an energy trying to come into the space. And again, I was like, it's time for me to leave, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a part of this. But I thought, no, that's my job here. I'm a protector, right? And so I turned around with my back to the altar. We're in the circle, and I just sat there with my arms open on my knees, just like, no bad energy can come in here. Nothing can come to these people, because I'm standing on the wall, right? And then I started feeling this need to purge, right? And I hadn't thrown up until this point, like through the other ceremonies. And I felt this violent need to wrench, and got my bucket there. And it's not like throwing up when you're sick. It's not that kind of purge. You know, people use purge like a euphemism. Like it was a wrench. However, what came out of me was not vomit. Like, what went into that bucket was something. It was an entity. Like, I could tell you, it was like Spider-Man venom. You know how it gets on you?
Yeah.
It was this black mass of just ugliness that went into that bucket, and I felt it come out of my soul, because I heaved that thing out of there. It's like something that was connected to me, And
that's fucking gnarly, dude.
When it came out, I felt so light and so liberated. And one of the helpers who is there as part of the ceremony that came over to get the bucket and wash out. I'm like, no, man, I got this one. And I took that bucket and I held it up proud and I walked out to the jungle and just unceremoniously dumped that thing out. I'm like, no more.
Wow.
And I came back renewed and feeling powerful, not myself powerful, but just connected to the source of power, right? That it could flow through me. That is my purpose to be there for other people, to serve other people. And that's what truly was giving me joy and happiness, was to be there. And one of the guys who was sitting right in front of me, he's actually the head cook for the whole place. So he lives there. He partakes in ceremonies all the time. His name is Remy, really sweet soul, very, very nice man. And he was right in front of me and he was having a very difficult experience, right? And here I am on my third experience, and God knows how many times he's been through this. And he's looking at me and I'm just sitting there kind of meditating as everybody's there. And he looks up, he's like, "You're there, Chris?" I'm like, "I'm here, brother." And he's like, "Okay." And he goes back off into this thing, and like his face that was like contorted in anger and pain just became like light, and he smiled. And then he started having obviously like a much different change of experience that he was having. And the next day in the sharing circle, I kid you not, man, this is what he says to me. He's like, "Man, I went to a deep, deep, dark place and I didn't know like if I could make my way out of it. And when I opened my eyes, I saw you sitting there tall, like a tree that reached all the way up to the sky. And I felt like I was in the shade of this protective tree. And because I could rest easy." And I was like, he's like, "You were strong, and you were strong for me. And I appreciate that."
See, dude, it wasn't just in your mind.
No.
That energy was real and being shared with the other people.
Yeah. And you could feel it from across the room. You could feel someone's joy. You could feel their hurt. And so you could send them prayers. You could send them energy. Like it was a mutual exchange of.
See, bro, we are connected in ways we don't understand.
Absolutely. And the experience of the ayahuasca within the ceremony absolutely showed me that, without a doubt, that we are all connected in so many ways that are unbelievable. And,
yeah. It's literally, it's like Avatar.
Yeah.
Like everything's connected,
yeah.
you know?
It even brings me to the point of wondering, like, what is the nature of our reality? Are we living in some kind of a simulation? Or like there are deeper questions, and I can go off on all kinds of rabbit holes about what is the nature of this. However, go ahead.
When you purged that really vile negative energy and you felt renewed, is that something that you carried with you at the completion of the ceremony? Or was that like an experience that transpired during the ceremony?
No, I still feel it now. Like that weight,
Wow.
that weight I was carrying, like I felt
it's literally in the fucking dirt in the jungle somewhere.
Yeah. Just being washed away by the rains, man. Like it was that. And since I've got rid of that, like, I don't want to feel like, say it's like schizophrenic, but the person who I was, like it ceased to be, right? Like my ego, the guy who was Chris and all of his backstory and all of his traumas and all of his expectations and whatever, like it didn't matter anymore, right? I don't matter. What matters is to serve other people, to love other people, and to be there and to do the best I can, because ultimately I realized that's what brings me the greatest amount of joy.
Yeah.
It's kind of selfish in a way.
Bro, we're all selfish to a certain degree,
but
it
makes me happy to see other people and to have those conversations with people afterwards about their experiences and their traumas, and to offer an encouraging word. Like over the last 2 years, I've met some really wonderful people just in and around my neighborhood who've come into my life. Like, you talk about manifesting things, right? Like, I had no friends anymore. I had no social work life or anything. I'm just kind of a shut-in in my house. Like I don't have anything. Mm-hmm. And then I start meeting people who want to talk about deep things, who want to have a spiritual connection. And I was like, okay, fine. I turned my garage into half of it's got horse stall mat. The other half is padded, so we can roll and do training and jujitsu. We can work out. So I got people coming over 4 or 5 times a week. My kids are bringing friends. We're having nightly workout sessions. I put a sauna in the backyard, sauna sessions, long hikes in the woods. We're meditating together, and I'm building a community.
This is awesome.
A community of people who are dedicated to being better human beings, right? Yep. Not just spiritual woo-woo, but like we're physically stronger, we're mentally strong, we're taking care of each other, like friends and family that are starting not just be strangers, but like to integrate as a family, right?
And bro, I think to build that family, you have to also integrate some type of adversity and some type of physicality into it.
Absolutely.
And I talk about it at my jiu-jitsu gym nightly, because practice ends at 7:30 on the dot, and I'm rarely locking the doors before 8:30. And you can look around and it's like all these people just went through massive amounts of adversity with each other. And now that's in the past, and they're all sitting there and they're bonding as humans.
Yeah.
And you can look around the room, and like last Friday, it was super powerful, because I told my buddy that I was sitting next to, I was like, look around the room right now. And there was literally like 15 little separate groups with 2 or 3 people in each one having a conversation about whatever it was, but they were really, everybody was engaged in the moment. And it's like, you can only get that by going through like some type of adversity together.
Yeah.
And like, it's cool hearing like, that's where you're finding a lot of peace now.
Yeah. It does. It comes full circle. And again, I wouldn't be here experiencing this had it not been for all the bad things. So,
yeah, bro, it was Beavis and Butthead. Like, you don't think of them as philosophers,
No.
But I've probably said this on the podcast before, but there was an episode where they said, if nothing sucked, nothing would kick ass.
That's true.
And it's like, man, life is peaks and valleys. You had to feel the valleys in order to rise to the peaks, because if you didn't have that contrast, your life would be in neutrality.
Absolutely.
And who wants that?
And you don't. And the trick is, though, is not to say that the peaks are good and the valleys are bad, right? Because, you know, you have a wave with a crest and a trough. It's a wave, right? You can't have the trough without the crest. You can't have the peak without the valley.
So it's just all part of it.
It's all a part of it, right? And taking away your subjective judgments of those things and learning not to judge them as good or bad, just accept them for what they are. For me, I think is the biggest takeaway of all is acceptance. And when you accept things, you start having clarity and options start opening up. And as woo as it is, man, the universe starts working in your favor and things become easy. I don't feel like I struggle against the flow of life anymore. And I have more blessings that I've ever had in my entire life. And like, I've been financially blessed to the point, like, I have more than I'll ever need for the rest of my life. Like, just dropped into my lap. But I had to trust God. I had to walk away from everything with nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, beautiful things start happening.
I love it, bro.
And it comes from a position of trust.
When you say trust God, has this journey point or directed you towards a specific religion or spirituality? Or do you think of God as just the force that's bigger than us?
Yeah. The word God obviously has like so much baggage attached to it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And, you know, growing up as a kid in this culture, like, you always think of God as like, that's the dude's name, you know, the guy with the white beard and the long hair.
Yeah.
Like, do you know John? Do you know Bill? Do you know God?
Yeah.
Like that's it. But, you know, after that first experience I had where I felt like I'd sat in the presence of the divine, of the Almighty, like I knew at that moment that if I had any concept of God, like if I could have a mental image of it, it's an idol. Like it's clearly something I've created. It's not what it is, because the ultimate reality cannot be spoken of. Like
we can't even comprehend it.
Can't even comprehend it. It's a place beyond words, right?
Yeah.
So we can kind of point towards it using language, but we can't define it. And anybody who thinks that they can come in and tell you what the divine reality is,
they're full of shit.
Yeah, or they're worshiping an idol that they've created, a mental construct.
Yeah.
Because you can't have 2 people from the same congregation who've been raised in the same church their whole life sit down and agree on everything they think God is, right?
Yeah.
Because the only place you can encounter God is in your heart, you know. And for my Christian friends out there, Luke 17:21 says, the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. It's nowhere else, right? And there's not a mountaintop you can go to, and there's not a retreat anywhere in the world that you're going to go and experience God or find truth. It's in your heart. Like, it's there. It's in the silence, actually. And if you sit silently and just breathe and listen, you'll hear everything you need to know. Like, God will speak to you there, however you define God, however God speaks to you in your heart, because it reaches each one of us individually.
Yeah.
And,
wow, dude.
And so that's kind of like, I don't have any particular dogma when it comes to that. And the only thing I would tell people, and not to be like an insufferable evangelical to try to preach this thing, is like, it's up to you to find your healing. It's up to you to contact God, right? Like, God isn't necessarily going to come down out of the sky or whatever. There's a humility that comes. And when you humble yourself, then all of a sudden, like, you get exalted, you get lifted up, right? Because you stop being finite. You stop being your little ego, and you transcend what you think of as self. Like, I'm no longer locked up in this bag of skin, just looking at the world from behind my eyes. I'm an integral part of all of creation itself. And those sort of spiritual realizations, like, I'm sure you can come to them through years of meditation and whatnot. Or if you're at your wit's end and ready to end your life, like, all of a sudden that moment of clarity comes. But there's a lot easier way to reproduce that, and that is through these plant medicines. They produce these experiences that allow you to see life in a different way. I kind of, it's akin to like watching the Wizard of Oz, right? The whole world has always been in black and white. This is the only channel I get, and all of a sudden, there are other channels, right? There's bandwidth that I didn't understand, and every time I've partaken in these plant medicines or in these ceremonial things, it stretches your bandwidth. Your perception of consciousness gets a little bit different, and it can't fit back into that original box it was in. Like, there are more possibilities. I'm open to more that I don't know, and I'm not so certain about things anymore. So when it comes down to religion, it's like, you will see what you need to see. Everyone will, and I won't judge your journey. Only I would encourage you to seek truth. So when I say God, that it's in the sense of universe of the unspeakable reality that none of us can truly define, right? It's where we meet God in our hearts. So, that answered that question.
Dude, it answered it perfectly. It was fucking awesome. So then, how many times have you revisited like this type of retreat or that?
Just one.
Okay.
So I went to that one this March, and it was profoundly life-changing.
So because of that, that's what, like, okay, this is now part of the mission, is bringing this to others.
Like, I knew, like, it's like, this is so powerful, like, life-changing for me. Just the change in perspective and of life. And it's funny because compared to everybody else who was at the retreat, my experience was like a difficult experience. Like, I didn't get the joy and the woo-woo and everything. I got a mission and a lot of stuff that I know I still need to unpack and work on.
Well, one of my buddies always says, he goes, the universe gives you what you need, not what you want.
Exactly. And I was kind of hoping a little bit for that experience where you kind of get blown out of your mind, and, you know, you see the center of the universe and you get the colors and just the awe and the wonderment. And man, I wrote it in my journal the next day, like no, like, there's more awe and wonderment right here in reality than anywhere else. You don't need to be anyplace else.
Yeah.
And what was amazing about the experience with the ayahuasca is that everybody in that ceremony got exactly what they needed, whether it was difficult, easy, joyful, hard, or for me, it kind of felt neutral, right? I didn't feel like I had much of experience at all other than my mental headspace. Everybody got what they needed. And that's what makes it, like, to me, all the more real, because like, it told me what I needed to hear, like, or at least it allowed me to hear what I needed to know. And it's tough to explain because there are thoughts and emotions and feelings, and you're in a state of being that words just fail at, right? And but it does change. It changes everything. And when I got back, I'm like, hey man, how can I get this to other people in our community, right? It's like, I called up David, and David, who runs that retreat. I'm like, hey man, could you do a veterans and PTSD one for, you know, first responders, military guys or whatever? He's like, yeah, we could put that together. And I'm like, hey, I know a guy through a guy, maybe he's got an audience out there, and I know these guys might be interested. It's given me healing, and there might be some guys out there who could use it. Let's put together a retreat and just put the invitation out there to the universe and see what can happen.
Yeah. So how many spots are available at any given session? So
I think there's between 15 and 20, depending on, like, if you want private rooms or cabins or whatnot. And the retreat center itself is actually a really cool place. It's called La Florestral in Costa Rica. And it's in the middle of the jungle, and all the buildings are kind of ferro cement and like look like little mushrooms and are built into the countryside. And I walked around in a pair of board shorts barefoot for the better part of a week, you know, going down to the river. Like, there's a real pretty river that flows through it that you can go and sit and meditate. The people that are there, everyone, like, I've never been in such a place where just that loving kindness and gentleness and openness of everybody involved. Like, there's a feeling there that you get of family and acceptance that I've never felt anyplace else immediately. And just the wonderfulness of the jungle, and then the facilitators, the people that live there. The nice thing about a retreat like that is, you know, especially if it's 8 or 9 days long or 7 days long, you're going out of country, right? You're leaving everything that's familiar to you. You're spending a significant amount of time with intention in this place, right? And you've got it planned months in advance and stuff. So it gives you more of an opportunity to really plan for your for your trip, right? For how you're going to do this, and set proper intentions. And if I could offer one recommendation to anybody, it's your intentions absolutely matter. And those have to be set. And you have to know that you're going for the right reasons, and to prepare yourself, because the more you prepare, the more you're going to get out of it, honestly. And so anyway, that's the location, beautiful jungle area. And then a week long of spending 15, 20 guys, in close proximity with one another, sharing life, sharing meals, sharing time, sharing space. And I never, people talked about that all the time. Like, what does it mean to hold space for someone or share space? And I really learned what that was there, that you could just sit there with someone and right next to them on a rock for an hour and not have to say a word, but like share energy with another person, or have someone tell you their life story and just
listen.
Just listen. Yeah. Let them get that off their chest, right? And like it's such a powerful thing to share that with other human beings. Like, you feel, we have our social media and we think we're all connected to these people, but you're not. Like, it's that real human connection like we're having right now, to sit down and look at somebody in the eye and feel their life and their story. And like, man, like I see myself in you, and vice versa. So there's a really cool interaction that happens when you share space and ceremony with other people. And that's why religions have congregations. That's why we have regular meetings. And so often in our culture, particularly, we don't have those, right? Where every religion's like whatever, and we don't really get together.
And we're moving more and more towards isolation. Yeah. Like, me and my wife were watching a movie the other night, and one of the commercials said, if you're not ready to send your children back to school in these dangerous times, we have now offering a fully online curriculum that you can sign up with and stay home and stay safe. And I was like, fuck, dude. They're perpetuating more isolation, and the isolation is like one of the killers.
Yeah. And it's a campaign of fear. That's how you stay controlled, is fear.
Yeah. It's nuts, man.
Like, once you get rid of the fear, you can be free. And there's a spiritual freedom that comes with that. Right. And same thing with the job, right? Not having a paycheck for the last couple months, like you have to trust the world and trust the universe, right? And like, and then what happens.
So for people that are listening, that are like, man, that does sound like something I need or something that I want. Is there? I think you mentioned it earlier. It's not just like, hey, go to this link and sign up. There's like an application process. Yeah. You kind of have to be accepted in. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I won't say accepted, but like, they want to know like why you're coming, and
like, make sure people are the correct fit.
Yeah. And I can't imagine anybody like wanting to go do this for a week who doesn't already have a little like sense of what it's about and why they want to go. It's not like, hey, we're going to a rave in the jungle for a week to get messed up. Let's go. It's like, it's not that. So do you know like where to direct people specifically? Yeah. So if you go to, wethemedicine.org, and that's David Price's website, and that's what he runs. And so he has workshops and clinics and everything that he does outside of the Florida Straw Retreat Center as well, but he'll be hosting that as well. And then also, if you go to, I think it's soundoflight.org or Soul Circle, SOL Circle in Costa Rica, and that's the actual retreat center in La Flor Straw. And they have retreats that go out throughout the year, right? So if you don't come to the one that we're specifically hosting for veterans and first responders is April 6th through the 14th, and that's over Easter weekend. So if you want to come for a rebirth and a resurrection of your own spirit, and to celebrate the resurrection of your life, it would be a good opportunity. And it's going to be other veterans. And I kind of went back and forth on like, is it better just to have, a dedicated retreat to us, or to
see who the universe puts you with,
brings together, right?
Yeah.
And
because Tyler talked about that, and he's like, man, the people that I was sharing the space with, initially I was disgusted by him and I was bothered by him.
Yeah.
And then he realized like all of those emotions that he felt for the other people was part of his journey.
Absolutely.
And
so I go, like, it's so funny listening to those stories, because I felt like I was a part of those conversations. I'm like, yeah, like you feel some of that. And the benefit of having the one that I went to was a total mixed group of people, is that you realize, like, just because I was military or law enforcement and the baggage that I carry, it's not unique to me. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a private struggle. Everybody's fighting a war inside of themselves. And I'm no different or no worse off than everybody else. And that to me, like, it made me feel a little bit more normal in that sense.
Yeah.
So like, hey, it's not just me who's all effed up. Like,
we're all effed up together.
We're all effed up together. And so there's a little solace in that we can enjoy that together. However, Also on the other part of the coin is sharing that space with people who've had very similar experiences. You might be a little bit more open to be vulnerable, or that energy that all of us kind of carry that we need to get out, we can corporately release together or hold that space together. And
and I would say this, like the people that are drawn towards sharing that experience with like-minded people versus the people that aren't, the universe will put them in the right one.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that. So there's another retreat being hosted, I think at the beginning of January, like January 3rd through the 9th or something like that. You can check it out. I don't have the hard dates on that, but it's already established. If you want to make it to that one, that's not a veteran specific one, but there's also that one in April 6th through the 14th.
The one in April that we're talking about, are you going down to participate?
Yeah. So I'm going down to Costa Rica in November with my family, and we're going to spend about a month down there.
Okay.
And then right before Christmas, my wife and my kids are going to come home, and I'm going to stay as a volunteer at the retreat center through the end of April. And I'm going to help facilitate all the other groups that come through, help serve meals, help laundry, set up things, and just be of service to other people, and also partake in the ceremonies myself, just to go deeper with the medicine. I feel like this is going to be a calling for me to work with this for the rest of my life.
Dude, this is awesome.
And, and so I have a lot of things that I still have to unpack in myself, but it's also an opportunity to serve in a very tangible way other people. And I'll be there when this retreat comes through, and I'll be a participant as well. And
now I'm wanting to check my calendar because here's the thing, like, Tyler's experience was literally 25 minutes up the street from here, right? And not to take anything away from that, like, is location necessarily a driving factor on what you're going to get out of it? I'm not sure, but being in the jungle, kind of like you said, like you leave all of normal life behind,
everything that's familiar, it opens you up,
and then you can let this really take its, like, I don't know how to articulate it necessarily, but let it be what it's supposed to be, removed from all the other aspects of your life. I think that would be something that makes sense to me more.
Yeah, and it's over the course of 8 days, so like the intensity of that experience, right? It's not just 1 or 2 nights. Like you're learning a lot, and you're able to process that, and you're able to stay in this kind of safe, energetic bubble where you can maintain that kind of presence that you're experiencing, right? Because anybody who's been through these things before will tell you, like, the hardest part is that transition out of that back into your normal everyday life. It's really abrupt. That thing. So, the retreat experience, it's kind of like a pilgrimage, right? It really does. The entire experience, right? As soon as you say, like, I want to go, or I have the intention to go, I'm not sure when, you're already on the experience. Like, it's a part of that. And then I've learned so much afterwards, post experience, that it made it all worthwhile, right? Like the totality of my entire life has been this experience. The jungle is a special place. Like, where you talk about energy, there's an energy that exists in this place, very intentional. And the vines that the ayahuasca are growing right up the trees, right around you. The leaves are all around you, right?
That's cool.
The frogs, the monkeys in the trees, just the beautiful scenery. It adds a lot to that. It really does. Kind of like, puts you in like a Shangri-La kind of setting. So, and the setting is absolutely important, right? It's crucial. So anybody out there who might be like me thinking, hey man, I might want to try microdosing or try some of these things for my own healing. If you don't have a lot of good context for what you're about to experience, there's benefit for it, but like it also, that double-edged sword, it opens you up to a lot of things that you don't know. And if you don't know how to deal with those or experience those or integrate those experiences into your normal everyday life, it can drive you a little bit mad. So it's helpful to have guides, to have medicine people. Some of these traditions are thousands of years old, right? There's a wisdom that comes with following along from other people's lead, right?
Of course there is.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to believe everything or like all these things have, some kind of magical purpose or whatever, but I respect the ritual, right? Whether it does something for me or not that I can or can't see. I've got to the point where I realize, like, just because I don't realize it or I can't see it doesn't mean it isn't real, right? So,
well, it's kind of bizarre, and it's kind of an American approach to things, that like Eastern medicines or ancient traditions and things that have been happening since the beginning of mankind. We just put all of our eggs in Western medicine now, which is just a few hundred years old. So why is it out of the realm of possibility that some of these ancient procedures or ancient techniques are actually something that can have a substantial impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, it's just, I think here in the West, we are just so devoid of any spiritual connection whatsoever. Like, I don't know anybody in my immediate circle of people, even people who are fairly religious, who have a feeling or a way about their being where you tell that they walk in the spirit, right? Like they are in touch with the divine ground of source. Like there's every once in a while you meet someone like that. Mm-hmm. But within that medicine community, the people that I met, like there are some people who are very evolved beings, like who transcended a lot of like the day-to-day kind of stuff that grinds us down. They have a much better perspective, and whether it's, Zen or Stoicism or a combination of all of that and letting go of the things and just being in acceptance, there's a powerful like realization that comes with a spiritual connection, right? Because that's ultimately your source. Because when you realize you're not your body, right? Like you can have your arms blown off and whatever, like you're still you.
Yeah.
So how much of your physical body can be removed?
Yeah. What are you?
What are you, right?
Yeah.
And then you realize, I'm not my thoughts. Like those are clearly not me. So I'm not my name. I'm not my nationality. I'm not my age. I'm not
this body. Yeah.
I'm not this body. I'm not any of these things I thought I was, right? And then what I thought I was always what other people told me I was. Hey, Chris, you're this, you're this, you're this. So my mental image of this person was a construct. It was a cartoon character. It's like not what I am. And so trying to figure out what I am is the great mystery, right? Like, dude, what is that, right?
You want to know the craziest thing about your whole story is like, dude, getting kicked out of flight school, getting hurt, having, not being able to be a cop anymore. Like all of these struggles have brought you to the point where you're figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
Which is in the end is going to be probably the best thing that you could discover on this earth, as opposed to if everything in flight school went well, you might be a fucking 04 somewhere in charge of some, who knows, you know what I mean? And it's like,
absolutely.
It brought you right here, right now.
I realized that had I did a career in a flight suit, I would have been insufferable. Man, my ego would have got away from me. I would have been the coolest thing since sliced bread. Right?
Yeah.
Like, hey man, look at me. Like I do all this cool stuff.
So dude, you had to.
I had to
go through all that.
I had to. And so what am I at the end of that? Like nothing.
Yeah.
And I accept that. And there's a beauty in that, right? Because like you can say the same expression two ways. Nothing matters. Or nothing matters.
Yeah, right? No, yeah, like, I think about that.
Like, right? Like it's the same thing. Just like loneliness and solitude. They're both the same condition. It's just what's the difference between being lonely?
Yeah, your perception of it.
It's your perception, right? And I used to not like being alone. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I really enjoy my solitude now. I take long walks in the woods. I sit endlessly on my meditation cushion, just
that's fascinating.
Enjoying the experience, right? And it really helps put things into perspective. And I can't thank David and We the Medicine and the ayahuasca experience enough for really solidifying that and giving me a renewed sense of mission and purpose in life. And like, hey man, just go out and love everybody, just serve everybody, and it'll go well with you. And since I've been doing that,
it's going well.
It goes well with me, shockingly enough.
Yeah. So it just proves to you this isn't some fucking weird woo-woo bullshit. It's like, and I've been noticing that in my life too, is like when I put energy into the right things, and again, like you said, it sounds kind of selfish, but at the end of the day, you have to be good in your own heart and your own self to be good for the other people around you.
Absolutely.
And so like finding a path that serves you the best, anyone that doesn't think that that's reasonable, I mean, come on, what are we talking about, Yeah. And so it's awesome to hear that you went through all this adversity, but it brought you to a place where like you do have that renewed sense of mission, and you have something that you're extremely passionate about and something that you can give and enrich other people's lives. I like just from this conversation alone, man, like I'm going to listen to this podcast because I always listen to them as a consumer as well. Not only to critique myself, but as we're sitting here recording, sometimes you don't quite take in every last little fucking nugget, I'm already sold on it. Like I'll be going to those websites tonight and figuring out dates and seeing if it's something that works for me. Because I've already wanted to do this, but I feel like this is the right time.
Yeah.
You'll
know it. Like it's one of those things like, you'll know in your heart, like they'll speak to you and like, this is it. And,
yeah. Like Tyler said, he's like, dude, the plant medicine starts to work as soon as you make the decision, you know?
Well, I got a funny story about 3 or 4 nights into our retreat. One of the guys who was there got busted for smuggling coke into the retreat.
Oh shit.
Yeah. True story. So,
cause you need to be clean of everything, right?
Clean of everything. So, like all of a sudden there's like, hey, the director wants to see this guy, and we're like, what's happening? He's like, oh, you got busted smuggling coke in here or something. I'm like, what? And it turns out that he had a massive headache because he hadn't had any caffeine, like leading up to the retreat and everything. And he's gone like 3 days without caffeine, and he's got a splitting headache. So he calls up one of the cab drivers who's bringing people from the airport to the retreat center. He's like, hey, can you bring me just a can of Coke? Like Coca-Cola. And I guess he
lost in translation.
So he left, I guess he left a big tip, when we first came. So the cab driver's like, oh, this is the guy who left a big tip. So he comes with like a box with like 4 2-liters of Coca-Cola to the retreat center. And like, somebody's like, what are you doing? He's like, no, man, I just wanted a little can of Coke just to take the edge off the headache. And they're like, no. It's like, there are other things we can do for your headache. We can help you. You don't need the sugar and all this stuff. This caffeine and stuff is not good for you while you're going through ceremony. So that was the smuggling Coke into the retreat. So yeah, it's the experience itself is a good one, and the one that's being put on in April, you'll have 3 ayahuasca experiences, and then the second to last day is a sweat lodge, and it's a Native American sweat lodge ceremony with peyote, and it's a difficult ceremony, like it was for me. I won't say it for everybody, just to put an intention out there, but I learned a lot in that one. That one was shockingly difficult, to be honest with you.
And here's the other thing about it is like, I like to, I don't know if challenge myself is necessarily the right word, but I'm nervous to do this.
Yeah, you should be.
And so part of me is like, that's why you should do it.
Yeah.
Because it's stepping outside of your comfort zone, and everything in this life worth having comes with some sort of struggle or adversity.
Absolutely.
Are
you a Star Wars nerd by chance?
I'm not, dude.
So
it's funny you say that, but I don't know if you saw the flag driving in, but one of my neighbors has this big skull flag with horns on the front of their house. And I was like, dude, is my neighbor a fucking Viking? That's cool looking, right?
Like Mandalorian.
Yeah, it is. It's a Star. And then one of my buddies like, bro, that's Star Wars shit. I was like, oh fuck.
Well, for everybody else out there who will get the analogy, in The Empire Strikes Back, there's a scene where Luke is training with Yoda, and they're in Dagobah in the swamp there, and Yoda basically tells Luke he's got to go into this cave, and Luke goes to put on his pistol belt and his lightsaber, and Yoda's like, hey, you're not going to need your weapons in there, and he's like, what's in there? And Yoda's like, only what you take with you, and he's like, okay. He puts on his weapon and everything and still goes into the cave. And who does he face in the cave? Darth Vader. And he ends up getting in a duel with him and cutting off his head. And when the mask pops open, who does Luke see? His own face, right? Mm-hmm. The ayahuasca experience is very much like that. You are only going to see what you take with you. Like it's not going to show you something that's not already inside of you. It's just going to allow you to see it. And so you can't be afraid of your own shadow. You cannot be afraid of what's inside of you, because it's not going to show you something that you aren't already. And that's the beauty of it. So the experience itself, if you throw up, you throw up. It's not a big deal, right? But when you do, like, what you're getting rid of. Like it's very apparent to you. It's not just like, I don't feel good, I need to throw up. It's like there's an energy, there's something associated with this that I'm getting rid of purging something. So if that's the hang up for some people, I know it's like, I don't want to shit myself or puke or something. Like, yeah, it happens, but for a reason.
There's a purpose behind it.
There's a purpose. Yeah. There's a purpose behind it. You don't feel like I'm just getting sick to get sick.
Well, and fuck, like you said, you purged that out.
It was energy. It was an entity.
To this day, you can feel that it's gone.
Clean. Yeah. Like I feel a weight has been taken out of my soul. And, for people who are way out there on the woo woo, man, maybe it was some demon or some entity or something that had attached to me.
Yeah.
For somebody who's medical, it's like, yeah, that stuff that went into your stomach just mixed with bile and it came back out, like whatever in between. But I can tell you what I experienced, and it was a negative energy leaving me, and I feel clean since then. So I feel renewed and happy and joyful. And
dude, I'm in, man.
So
I don't want to commit 100% right now, because I got to check dates and see what's up with the family and stuff. But your story is inspiring. It's powerful.
I appreciate that.
And that's the whole reason why when Russ connected us, instead of like putting a link on my Instagram page, I was like, dude, let's have him come up and really unpack the story, because that's what's going to impact people, you know?
And I appreciate the opportunity. And obviously, like I said before, this is going to entail me being a little bit vulnerable, telling my story and how I got here. But like, I don't care about me anymore. Like, I want to help others.
Yeah.
And I see the absolute value of this in helping others. And on top of that, We the Medicine is a 501c, I guess, in Costa Rica, and he's trying to establish it here in the U.S. To get donations. So if you want to sponsor a veteran who maybe can't go to be able to go, he's working right now to try to, I guess it's called piggybacking, because he's a British guy living in Costa Rica, so it's hard for him to establish a 501c3 within the United States. But I guess through other veterans organizations or other established charities, they can basically piggyback off of another charity. So like, if you can get in touch with someone who's like, hey, this veterans group here can accept donations, and then they can part it out to another group, right? So kind of like an intermediary.
Yeah.
So he's working with that, and I'm trying to do that right now. And I'm committed to sponsoring one friend who is not financially well off, but he's an Army veteran and he's suffering. And I'm going to send him, like, I already told him, like, I'll pay your way, man. You're going. And so, that's a good opportunity. And if anybody's out there and they know somebody who needs to go, like, you're welcome to sponsor somebody or pay it forward if you need to. And we're working on that. So hopefully I'll get some more information on that too, because the medicine is powerful and it's really, it should be open for all. Like, it should be legal everywhere. There should be these ceremonies everywhere in the country, in the world, as a matter of fact.
Nope. That's where we're at today, where like things that actually help you are prohibited, but every corner store you go in is pushing cigarettes and whiskey to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah. They want your vibration low. They want you ignorant. They want you afraid. They want you sickly. They want you incapable.
And bro, let's be the opposite of that.
Yeah. And when you just kind of put both fingers out to Babylon and its system, and you're like, no more, man. This is not what I signed on for. Life is bigger than this. Like, we are imbued by our Creator with unlimited powers and force. Like, you're a special creation of God.
Yeah, dude.
Like when you think about it, like, your eyeballs popped open to this existence, having never been open before, and you're creating this world by your conscious existence. And at some moment, you're going to close your eyes and it's going to cease to be. So from your cradle to your grave, like, you're the creator. You're creating it all. And whether you believe in God or not, the only way God could ever experience himself is through your eyes. Because if you were never here, God never was. Like, you have to be here for God to exist, or else it's all for naught, right? So obviously, and it's a mirror relationship. So when you sit down and you look in the mirror and you meditate and like, I'm created in the image of God. What are you looking at in the mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
When Moses was on the mountain and asked God what his name was, he said, I am, right? What do we say all the time? I am this, I am this, I am this, right? I am. Like that pure sense of being. If you just sit and like meditate on, what does it mean? I am.
Bro, this is crazy, because I had a meditation experience in my sauna where I was sitting there and I'd smoked a bunch of weed. So I was like, but dude, people that don't utilize plant medicine hear that and they think, oh, he's just getting high and crazy. It expands your mind to be able to interpret things in a way that is just different.
Yeah.
And it was like 215 degrees in there, and it was so hot that I felt like I can't be in my physical body anymore. I need to just separate from my physical body, and then I'll be able to find peace in here, because the meat suit is what's suffering. Yeah. I'm not suffering.
No, it's just the body.
And then, so I felt like I transcended my physical body, and I was interacting with an entity that just felt like God.
Yeah.
And this is just through heat and cannabis. You know what I mean? Yeah. This isn't ayahuasca or anything too crazy. And this entity that I perceived as God simply said to me, I am you and you are me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember I came inside after that and told my wife, I was like, I just had a very profound experience, because by saying I am you and you are me is really saying like, we're all one.
Yeah.
This is all connected.
Absolutely.
And again, it was like, like people will hear these experiences, and if they haven't felt something like that, like, these guys are just smoking drugs and being crazy. Well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But by smoking drugs and being crazy, we're arriving at the best emotional and mental states. As I'm coming up on 42 here pretty quick. and I feel like I'm just getting started. And just feeling your energy and talking to you, bro, all the shit that you went through, that was all leading up to you just getting started.
Yeah. It's every day, man. Just, this is it. Like, you have this opportunity, right? And choose your day, how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely feel that power.
So you put all the websites out there already?
Yeah, they're out there, and I can get them to you. You can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I was gonna say text me all the links, and then I'll put them in the show notes below so people can just scroll down. But also, if they want to reach out to you directly and share an experience or ask you guidance on something, is that something you're comfortable with? And do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll create an email address and I'll get that to you, and just specifically for this.
Okay, so we'll do the same thing that Tyler did.
Yeah, like I listened to that last week's episode. I'm like, that sounds like a good idea. And
Tyler's inbox has been plugged full, and it's only been out that came out Thursday.
Yeah, Yeah. So yeah, if this is calling to you, there's other retreats available, and I'd love to point everybody towards We the Medicine, because not only like the whole idea between that is like, you are the medicine. Like it's not the leaves, it's not the vines, that is medicine, but you yourself have the power to find healing within you. And learning those resources and learning how to integrate the experience of the medicine and all those other techniques, it's powerful. And you owe it to yourself to take some time. So my only recommendation for folks, if you do want to come down for the retreat, is don't just come down to Costa Rica for 8 days and arrive on the day, like the retreat starts, and leave on the day it ends. If you can, give yourself a couple days before and after, right? Come down maybe 2 days early, go stay at the beach at a VRBO or something, get into the vacation mindset, decompress. You're not stressed about time or arriving or whatever. And then afterwards, you might want to give yourself a couple days, or even maybe have your wife or somebody come down at the end of your week and spend a week in Costa Rica together, just really chill, and to allow you to kind of integrate your experience on the beach or up in the jungle, because it is an abrupt change coming from that very sacred, quiet space to getting on a plane and jumping right back into
standing in a TSA line, just like, fuck, I'm back.
Yeah, it's a harsh wake up. So you might want to ease yourself into that. And Costa Rica is such a beautiful place to begin with, that if you're going to be down there already for a week, instead of just seeing this one little retreat center in the jungle, at least take a couple of days off to go see the beaches and stuff too while you're there.
Yeah.
But the people that you will meet there are very wonderful. And anybody I've ever met who's had an experience with ayahuasca, even though the individual experiences might be a little bit different, generally speaking, like, they come around with the same conclusions, right? Listening to Tyler, I felt like you already had those conversations, that you're having with me, with him. It's the same thing. So,
but I love it though, because it's like, these aren't isolated things. When people put themselves out there and they actually develop a mindset of healing and moving forward, the shit fucking seems like it works almost every time, dude.
Yeah. And the life becomes easy, right? Like you do the things in such a way that you're not fighting against the flow of nature anymore. You go to the jungle, you take care of your spirit, you take care of your body, like the things that should be easy to do that we don't, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I don't know, kind of at a loss for words when it comes to that. I wish I was more effusive, but yeah.
I don't know. You use effusive, so I'll have to Google that one. Well, bro, I mean, we're coming up on 3 hours. I think we went through a lot of good stuff on today's episode, but is there anything on your mind that like you had intentions of sharing, or anything else before we wrap this up that you'd like to put out?
Just, anybody out there who's struggling, like, don't give up hope, right? A lot of us have been there, right? And, there is a way out, and there are treatment modalities and stuff. Like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And if you are in a rough place, just raise your hand and say, man, I'm done hiding it. Right. Like, because unless you face it, you're always going to be running from it. And that's cowardice. Right. And we're not cowards. And so if you're medicating yourself out there with alcohol and other things, or retail therapy in a new boat and just trying to find happiness, like, eventually it's going to wear out. And you have to look inside, man, and finding that inner journey is the most rewarding one. And I don't know, maybe because we're just 40 and we're on the back nine of life, and like, trying to think of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Yeah. And
the ayahuasca is the new midlife crisis.
Yeah, but it's a drug that's taken away all my desire for any sort of self-aggrandizement. I don't care about me. I don't care about my ego. If my name's associated with anything, it doesn't matter who I am. It matters what I can do for other people. And and I want to be of service. I want to be a joyful being. I want to be a peaceful warrior. My greatest weapon is love, and I'm going to transmute anger and bitterness and all that into straight love and joy. Like I am going to be that warrior, right?
Dude, I love it, man.
And so you can do that too. Everybody has that capacity within them, and don't give over to the fear. Don't give over to the depression. Like you are powerful. Every one of us has that power inside of us, and these medicines help you access that, but you already have it. And if you don't know how to get there, this is a tool to help you get there, but it's not the thing, right? Like the medicine is not the source. It just allows you to see what the source is. It allows you to tune in. And I just want to be very clear with that. Like I'm not like pushing, go do this. I'm pushing, go find your spirit, go commune with your spirit, your soul, with God, however you see that. And this is a tool that'll help you get there.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. I can tell just by this conversation, we're going to continue to be friends. We got some journeys together ahead of ourselves. It's going to happen, man.
Absolutely, brother.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.